The mafia boss who bought her silence and accidentally gave her his heart. She signed the contract with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. 18 months, no feelings, no questions. Absolute loyalty to a man the city whispered about in funerals and hospital rooms. Lena Hart thought she was selling her name. She didn't know she was about to lose something far more dangerous, her heart to the most feared man in New York. Before we begin, if you love stories where love is born in the shadows, hit that like button and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I'd love to see how far Lena and Adrian's story travels tonight. The rain hit Manhattan the way debt collectors hit a bad door. Hard, steady, and without apology. Lena Hart stood at the cracked window of what used to be her office, watching water streak the glass in long silver lines. The space behind her was almost empty now. The long oak drafting table she'd saved 3 years to buy was gone. The framed renderings of her first commercial build, a boutique hotel in Tribeca that got written up in 3 magazines, had been pulled off the wall and stacked by the door like she was burying them. Only her chair was left, and a single cardboard box that held the last 8 years of her professional life. 8 years. 12 employees, once. 2 floors and a flat-iron walk-up. A waiting list. Now a phone that wouldn't stop ringing, and not one of the names on the screen was calling with good news. "Miss Hart?" The voice came from the doorway. A man in a cheap gray suit, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. He had the tired expression of someone who'd delivered the same bad news to 100 other people that month and still hadn't figured out how to make it land soft. "I just need you to sign here, here, and initial the bottom," he said. "It's a formality. The locks get changed at 6. Lena didn't turn around right away. She watched a taxi splash through a puddle on 23rd Street and thought, weirdly, about how she used to love the rain. When she was 24, fresh out of Columbia, broke but hopeful, she used to sit by a window just like this one and sketch buildings on napkins. Rain made the city feel possible, like it was being washed clean for her. Now it just felt like the city was trying to drown her quietly, out of politeness. "Miss Hart?" "I heard you." She crossed the room, took the pen, and signed her name without reading the paperwork. What was the point? Her signature had already cost her everything it was going to cost her. A few more ink marks wouldn't change the math. The man in the gray suit cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, for what it's worth." "It's not worth anything," she said. Then she heard herself say it, and she flinched. "Sorry, that was rude. Thank you." He nodded like he got that a lot and slipped out the door. Lena stood alone in the middle of the empty office. The ceiling light buzzed. One of the bulbs had been flickering for 2 weeks, and she hadn't bothered to call maintenance because what was the point of fixing a light in a room you were about to lose? Her phone buzzed again. She looked down. Marcus. The name sat on the screen like a slap. She let it ring. Marcus Quinn. Her business partner. Her best friend since the 2nd year of grad school. The man she'd trusted with the firm's bank account, the firm's contracts, the firm's future. The man who, 6 months ago, had taken a $40,000 deposit from a client, routed it through a shell company, and vanished the day before payroll. The police had been looking into it. The police were still looking into it. Meanwhile, the client sued. The bank called the line of credit. 2 vendors filed liens. The insurance company raised their rates so high, it was cheaper to close the firm than keep it open. And Marcus? Marcus was somewhere warm, probably. Drinking something expensive, not thinking about her at all. Her phone stopped ringing, then started again. Different number this time, unknown. She almost ignored it. Then, because she was out of options and out of pride, she answered. "Lena Hart." "Miss Hart." A woman's voice. Clipped. East Coast. Expensive. "My name is Irene Costa. I work for Mr. Voss. I understand you've been trying to reach his office." Lena closed her eyes. She had been trying. For 11 days. She'd called everyone. Every old client, every contact, every distant acquaintance with money. A friend of a friend had mentioned a name, almost as a joke. "You want to save a sinking firm?" Adrian Voss is expanding property holdings. He's got the kind of capital that doesn't ask questions. She'd laughed at the time. Adrian Voss wasn't a real estate investor. Adrian Voss was the name people lowered their voices around. A man who supposedly owned half the trucking routes in Jersey, 3 entertainment licenses in Queens, and a federal prosecutor or 2. A man who had, according to the Post, taken 2 bullets in the spine at a charity event 6 years ago and was now, depending on which rumor you trusted, either a ghost, a cripple, or a king. She'd still made the call. Twice. Both times she hung up before the second ring. The third time she didn't. "Yes," Lena said. She sat down on the cardboard box because her legs were suddenly not interested in holding her. "Yes, I reached out about a potential consulting arrangement, residential redesign. If Mr. Voss is looking for—" "He is," Irene said. "He'd like to meet you. Tonight, 8 o'clock. I'll text you the address." "Tonight, Irene said, and there was a politeness in her voice that wasn't a question. "A car will be outside your apartment at 7:40. Wear something you can sit in for an hour without fidgeting. Mr. Voss dislikes fidgeting." The line went dead. Lena stared at the phone. Then she laughed, one sharp, dry sound with no humor in it, and dropped her head into her hands. The car was black, the driver didn't speak, and the address was somewhere north of the city. Far enough north that the skyline faded and the trees started, and the road narrowed into a private drive guarded by a gate that slid open before the driver even slowed. Lena sat in the back with her hands folded in her lap and tried to remember how to breathe. She'd worn the only thing she had left that still looked like money. A slate gray wrap dress she'd bought for a client dinner 3 years ago, black heels, her mother's pearl studs. Her hair was pulled back. Her makeup was careful. She looked, she hoped, like a professional woman who had not been crying in her bathtub for 6 straight nights. The estate appeared out of the trees like it had been waiting there since before the trees. 3 stories of limestone and dark glass, long and low and deliberate. No ostentation, no gaudy fountains, just scale. The kind of scale that told you the owner didn't need to prove anything. The driver pulled up to a side entrance. A woman was already waiting, tall, late 50s, steel gray hair cut into something precise. A tablet in one hand. "Miss Hart, Irene Costa." No handshake. "Follow me, please." Lena followed. The house was stunning, actually. That was the word that hit her first, before the fear caught up. Whoever had built this place had understood light. Tall windows, clean sightlines, materials that weren't trying too hard. Stone, leather, dark walnut. It could have been a museum. It also could have been a tomb. It was too quiet. Every step echoed. "He's in the East Study," Irene said, leading her down a long corridor. "A few things before we go in. You don't initiate contact. You don't stand over him. You don't ask about the chair. You don't ask about his family. You don't take anything from the desk. You don't record. You don't photograph. You don't mention what you see in this house to anyone ever. Understood?" "Understood. And Miss Hart." Irene stopped at a set of double doors and turned to look at her. For the first time, her face softened. Not into kindness exactly, but into something more like honesty. "Whatever he offers you, think about it carefully. People come out of this room with their whole lives rewritten. Sometimes for the better, not always." Lena swallowed. "Thank you," she said. Irene knocked twice on the door. A voice from inside, low, unhurried, said, "Come." The doors opened. Adrian Voss was sitting behind a desk the size of a small car. That was the first thing Lena noticed. The second was that he was younger than she'd expected. Maybe 38, 40 at most. Dark hair cut short, shot through with a little silver at the temples. A jaw that had been broken at least once. Pale gray eyes that didn't blink enough. He wore a charcoal shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearms, no tie, no jacket. His hands rested on the desk. They were the hands of a man who'd done work with them once and had decided to stop. The wheelchair was to the left of the desk. Matte black. Expensive. Almost hidden. Almost. "Miss Hart." His voice was rougher, up close than it had been through the door. A smoker's voice, or a man who'd been shouting in another language earlier in the day. He didn't rise. He didn't extend a hand. He just nodded at the chair across from him. "Sit." She sat. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Not in the way men sometimes looked at her on the subway. Not in the way investors had looked at her in pitch meetings, measuring whether she was going to cry when they said no. He looked at her the way a person looks at a file they are deciding whether to open. You studied at Columbia, he said. Masters in Architecture, 2015. You interned under Daniel Reyes for 2 years. You started your own firm at 27. The Tribeca Everett got you a feature in Dwell. 2 years ago, your revenue peaked at just over $3 million. Last year, it was $900,000. This year, you are closing. Your partner, Marcus Quinn, is currently in Panama. He is not coming back. Lena's throat went dry. How do you... I pay people to know things, Miss Hart. Please don't interrupt me when I am being thorough. It saves us both time. She nodded once. You have, Adrian continued in the same unhurried tone, $140,000 in personal debt, not including the firm's liabilities. You lost your lease yesterday. You have, at current spending, approximately 6 weeks before the bank places a lien on your apartment. You have no living parents, one sister in Portland who you speak to 3 times a year, and no romantic partner of record. You are, in the purest financial sense, at the end of a rope. He paused. Am I missing anything? Lena opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. My sister hasn't spoken to me in 18 months, she said. So you can subtract her from the rope. Adrian's mouth moved. Not a smile exactly, something more like acknowledgement. Noted. He folded his hands. I'm going to offer you something now, he said. Before I do, I'm going to tell you who I am. Not because you don't already know. I'm certain you do, or you wouldn't be sitting there holding your bag like it contains a grenade. Lena looked down. Her hands had gone white around the strap of her purse. She loosened them, slowly. My name is Adrian Voss, he said. I run certain businesses in the tri-state area. Some of them are legal. Some of them are not. The legal ones employ about 400 people, pay taxes, and produce revenue. The other ones, we do not need to discuss tonight, or ever. What you do need to know is that 6 years ago, a man walked up to me at a charity auction and put 2 rounds into my back. He was aiming for my head. He was nervous. He missed. He is dead now. So is the man who sent him. So are 3 other men who helped them. He said all of this the way another man might describe a flight delay. The attempt was not an isolated event. It was a message from a rival family that my position was vulnerable. For 6 years I have been answering that message. I have answered it thoroughly. His gray eyes didn't move. But the answer is not complete. My associates, my counsel, they require evidence that I am stable, that I am not a man with nothing to lose. They require a public signal that I am building something, not simply defending something. He paused. The traditional signal, Miss Hart, is a wife. Lena felt her stomach go cold. Mr. Voss, I am not finished. She closed her mouth. I am not proposing romance, Adrian said. I'm not capable of it at present, and I wouldn't insult you by pretending otherwise. I am proposing a contract. 18 months. You live in this house. You appear at certain functions on my arm. You sign a prenuptial agreement that protects us both. In exchange, I clear your debts. All of them. I settle the lawsuits. I rebuild your firm under a new name, with new capital, and I place 3 of my legitimate holdings in your hands as your first commissions. At the end of 18 months, we file an amicable divorce. You walk away solvent, respected, free. She stared at him. You want to marry me? I want to hire you, he said. The marriage is the packaging. For 18 months. 18. And in exchange, you pay off my debts. I pay off your debts. I rebuild your career. I restore your name. And I make very certain that Marcus Quinn understands, in a manner of my choosing, that what he did to you has consequences. A silence opened up in the room. It was a strange silence. It wasn't empty. It had weight. It felt like the silence of deep water. Lena found her voice somehow. And if I say no, Adrian's expression didn't change, then a car takes you home. Nothing happens to you. Nothing happens to your sister in Portland. This meeting was never had. I don't threaten women, Miss Hart, and I don't chase them. I'm offering a deal. You are permitted to refuse it. He let that sit a moment. But, he said, you won't. Excuse me? You won't refuse it. His voice was not cruel. That was almost the worst part. It was almost gentle. Because you're an intelligent woman, and you understand that what I'm offering is, arithmetically, the only door that doesn't end with you losing your apartment in 6 weeks. I'm not threatening you. I'm reading you a sentence you already wrote yourself. Lena's eyes burned. She hated him, suddenly and completely, for being right. I need to think about it, she said. Of course. I need a night. You have until 9 tomorrow morning. That's not a night. Adrian tilted his head. It's 12 hours, Miss Hart. It is more than most people get from me. He reached into a drawer. She flinched and hated herself for flinching, and pulled out a slim manila folder. He pushed it across the desk. The contract, he said. Read it tonight. Bring your lawyer if you have one. If you don't, Irene will recommend one. A real one, not one of mine. I want you clear-eyed. Lena took the folder. Mr. Voss. Adrian. Mr. Voss, she said again, because she needed the distance. Can I ask why me? He studied her for a long moment. Because, he said finally, you built a boutique hotel in Tribeca that made a magazine cry. Because you carried your firm on your back for 3 years when your partner was stealing from you, and you didn't notice because you were too busy working. Because you are not impressed by this house, which is rare. And because when I told you I had a dead man in my recent past, you did not reach for your purse. He paused. I need a wife the room will believe. Not a doll. A woman. You'll do. Lena stood up. Her knees almost gave, but she locked them. Good night, Mr. Voss. Good night, Miss Hart. He nodded, once, like a judge dismissing a witness. Drive safely. The road is slick. She did not sleep. She sat on the floor of her half-emptied apartment with the manila folder open on the coffee table and a glass of cheap red wine in her hand and read every page. Twice. Then she read it a third time, out loud, to make sure she understood what she was looking at. 18 months. Cohabitation in the Voss estate, with her own private suite. Public appearances at mutually agreed events. No sexual obligation explicitly stated. There was actually a clause typed in clinical, unromantic language. Physical intimacy shall occur only by mutual, uncoerced consent, initiated freely by either party, and may be withdrawn at any time without penalty or alteration of financial terms. She read that clause 4 times. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. An exit clause, if either party materially violated the terms. A non-disclosure so broad it covered conversations she hadn't had yet. And then the financials. She almost dropped the glass. He wasn't just clearing her debts. He was placing in escrow, in her name, an amount that was more money than her father had made in his entire life as a mechanic in Rochester. Enough to rebuild. Enough to rent a real office. Enough to hire back 2 of her old team. Enough to breathe. 18 months. 18 months of standing next to a man who had killed people, who would kill people again, who lived in a house where you didn't ask about the chair. 18 months of pretending. Pretending wasn't new to her. She'd pretended for 3 years that Marcus was her friend. She'd pretended for 2 decades that her mother's death hadn't broken something in her. She'd pretended every single morning for the last 6 months that she wasn't losing everything. What was 18 more months of pretending? She thought about her mother then. Her mother, who had cleaned offices at night to pay for Lena's drafting classes. Her mother, who had said, the last time Lena saw her alive, "Don't you dare build small, baby. I didn't scrub floors so you could build small." Her mother would be furious with her for signing this. Her mother would be more furious if she didn't. Lena pulled out her phone at 4 in the morning and typed out a message to the number Irene had given her. I'll sign. 9 a.m. She hit send before she could reconsider. Then she poured the rest of the wine down the sink, went into the bathroom, and stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. The woman looking back at her had her mother's eyes, dark, tired, stubborn. Okay, Lena said to her. Okay. It didn't sound like a prayer. It didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a woman bracing. At 9 a.m., she signed in Irene's office. At 9:15, a wire transfer hit an account that had been empty an hour before. At 9:30, a woman she'd never met introduced herself as Lena's new attorney, presented her with a fresh set of business filings, and informed her that Hart Design, the name she'd been forced to abandon, had, out of 8 that morning, been reinstated with a new EIN, a new insurance policy, and 3 commission projects already under contract. At 10, Irene handed her a ring. It was simpler than Lena had expected. A single old stone, not huge, set in a platinum band that had clearly belonged to someone else first. There was a small engraving on the inside, in a script too worn to read. It was his grandmother's, Irene said. He wanted you to know that, not because he's sentimental, because he needs you to know he isn't hiding the history. Should I thank him? He won't know what to do with it if you do. Irene almost smiled. Just wear it. Lena slid the ring on. It fit. Of course it fit. Somewhere in the last 48 hours, someone had measured her finger, and she hadn't noticed. The wedding, if you could call it that, happened on a Tuesday afternoon in a private judge's chambers in Westchester. 11 people were present. Lena knew 2 of them. She wore ivory, not white. Adrian wore black. He did not stand. The judge had been briefed, and the vows were adjusted so that the traditional rising at the altar was replaced with the 2 of them facing each other at eye level, Lena seated in a matching chair across from him. It was the most dignified thing anyone had ever done for her, and she had not expected dignity from this man. They exchanged rings. They said the words. When the judge said, "You may kiss," Adrian lifted one eyebrow, almost imperceptibly, at her. "Your call," the eyebrow said. Lena leaned in, very carefully, and pressed her lips to the corner of his mouth. Not the center. The corner. It was a kiss that could have been, depending on the angle, mistaken for a cheek. When she pulled back, his gray eyes were on her, and for the first time since she'd walked into his study, she saw something that wasn't control. It was gone before she could name it. "Mrs. Voss," the judge said. Lena didn't flinch. She'd been practicing that in the mirror for 3 days. "Thank you," she said. They rode back to the estate in the same car, in silence, for the first 20 minutes. The rain had stopped. Late sun cut through the windshield in slabs. Adrian's driver, a man named Reyes, who she'd been told she could trust absolutely, which was the same thing as being told she couldn't trust anyone else, kept his eyes on the road. Adrian watched the window. Lena watched her hands. Finally, somewhere on the sawmill, he spoke. "You did well in there." "I didn't do anything." "You didn't cry. You didn't stumble over the words. You didn't look at me like I was a wheelchair with a mouth. You did well." She turned to look at him and was surprised to find him looking back. Up close, in the late afternoon light, he looked tired. There was a line between his brows that she hadn't noticed in the study. His left hand, resting on his thigh, had a very faint tremor in it that he was clearly used to ignoring. Pain, not fresh, old pain, the kind that had become weather. "Mr. Voss, Adrian, you're going to have to start at some point. May as well be now." "Adrian," the name felt strange in her mouth. "I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer, because if I don't get one, this is going to fall apart very quickly." His jaw shifted. "Ask." "Am I in danger?" He didn't answer right away. That was in its way the most honest thing he'd done all day. "Yes," he said finally, "you are. Not from me. Not from anyone in my house. But by standing beside me, you have become visible to people who were previously not interested in you. I will not lie to you about that. I will tell you what I tell the men who work for me, which is that I take the safety of people under my roof very seriously, and in 6 years, no one under my roof has been harmed. That is not an accident. But it could happen. It could happen, Lena." He said her first name for the first time, and it landed oddly in her chest. "Anything can happen. I am not a man who promises things he can't deliver. I am telling you that the odds are with you, that the resources around you are significant, and that I will personally consider your safety my responsibility until the day this contract ends. And after, whether you want me to or not." She looked out the window. They were passing a stretch of road she didn't recognize. Stone walls, old trees. "I used to hate rich people," she said quietly. "When I was a kid. My mother cleaned their offices. I used to walk past those buildings at night with her and look up at the lit windows and hate whoever was inside. And now? Now I'm one of them, apparently." "No," Adrian said. "Now you're married to one of them. There's a difference. It's smaller than you think, but it's there." She almost laughed. She looked at him again. The line between his brows had eased slightly. "Adrian, Yes. I'm going to redesign that study of yours. His eyes narrowed. Excuse me. That room, where we met, it has no soul. The desk is beautiful, but it's facing the wrong way. You've got south light coming through a north-facing shade, which is insane. And that leather chair, the one behind you, it's a statement piece for a man who doesn't need to make statements. I'm going to redo it. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, and she would think about this later for a long time, Adrian Voss laughed. It was not a long laugh. It was a single, surprised sound, cut off almost immediately, as if his body had forgotten how the mechanism worked and had to retrieve it from storage. But it was a laugh, a real one. My study, he said. Your study. You've been my wife for 90 minutes, and already I'm providing value. He looked at her for a beat longer. Something in his face, just for a second, softened. Mrs. Voss, he said, you may do whatever you like to the study, within reason. If you move the safe, I will have to have a conversation with you about it. Otherwise, the room is yours. Thank you, husband. She said it flat, deadpan, experimental, just to see what it tasted like. It tasted like a word she was going to have to get used to. Adrian turned back to the window, but the corner of his mouth, that same corner she had very carefully, very deliberately kissed, stayed lifted, just slightly, for the rest of the drive. Huck. They arrived at the estate as the sun was going down. Lena stood in the cobbled courtyard with a small suitcase at her feet. Her real things would be moved in over the week, and looked up at the house that was now, technically, hers. The windows caught the last of the red light and turned gold. Behind her, a car door opened. Reyes was helping Adrian out, into the chair, with a practiced, unhurried motion that neither of them commented on. Adrian didn't like to be watched during the transfer. Lena had already figured that out somehow, without being told. She kept her eyes on the house. Mrs. Voss. Irene had appeared, tablet in hand. Your rooms are ready. I've had fresh flowers placed. If there's anything you'd like changed, tell me tonight and it'll be done by morning. Dinner is at 8. Mr. Voss prefers quiet at the table. Tomorrow, we begin on the calendar. The calendar? The public schedule, the appearances, the people who need to see you. Irene's voice dropped just slightly. There's a gala in 6 weeks. The Halloran Foundation. Half the city will be there, including some people who need to believe what they see. Lena felt the cold come back into her stomach. 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Mrs. Voss. It's going to come fast. Irene walked away, already speaking to someone through an earpiece. Lena stood alone of the courtyard for another moment. Then she felt him before she heard him. The soft hum of the chair's motor, the careful tread of Reyes behind him. Adrian rolled up beside her and stopped. He didn't speak for a long moment. He just looked up at the house with her, as if he were seeing it through her eyes for the first time. It's a cold house, he said eventually. I know it is. I grew up in it. My father liked cold rooms. I can fix that. I believe you. He glanced at her, sidelong. You should know. The west wing is mine. The east wing is yours. The common rooms are shared. My office on the second floor is off limits without my invitation. Everywhere else, you go wherever you like. You open whatever door you like. You ask whatever question you like. Of me or of the staff. They've been instructed to answer you honestly. Honestly? Within reason. Another one of those almost smiles. There are things I won't ask them to lie about to you, and things I'd rather you didn't ask. You'll learn which is which. And what if I ask you something you'd rather I didn't? He considered her for a moment. Then I will tell you I'd rather you didn't, he said, and you can decide what to do with that. She nodded slowly. Fair. They stood together, the woman in the ivory dress and the man in the chair, in the last of the red light, and for a moment Lena felt something she hadn't expected to feel on this day of all days. It wasn't safety, it wasn't love, it was nowhere near love. It was something much smaller, and in some ways more dangerous. It was recognition. The feeling you get when you sit down across from a stranger and realize, with a small shock, that you have met a person who reads the same pages you read, who notices the same details, who is, in some essential way, operating on your same frequency. She had expected a monster, or a mask, or a transaction in a suit. She had not expected a man who had laughed at her joke about the wrong-facing desk. She had not expected to laugh back. Adrian, she said quietly. Yes, I'm going to hold you to that. About being honest. About telling me when you'd rather I didn't ask. I'm going to need that. I'm going to need a real map in this house, or I'm not going to survive it. Adrian was quiet for a long beat. Then, without looking at her, he reached out his hand, the one with the faint tremor, the one he usually kept hidden, and let it rest, for just a second, on top of hers, where it was gripping the handle of her suitcase. His skin was warmer than she'd expected. You'll survive it, he said. He pulled his hand back before she could react. Then he turned the chair and moved toward the open door of the house, and Reyes picked up her suitcase, and Irina was already calling her name from the steps about dinner at 8. Lena stood for one more moment in the courtyard, looking at the place on her own hand where she realized she could still feel the warmth of his. She looked down at the ring on her finger, the worn engraving, the old stone. 18 months, she thought. 18 months with a man she did not love, in a house that was not hers, playing a role in front of people who would kill her if they stopped believing it. She took a breath. She lifted her chin. And Lena Voss. Not Hart. Not anymore. Not for 18 months. Not until a piece of paper said otherwise. Walked into her new house. The door closed behind her. And somewhere in the West Wing, a man in a wheelchair sat alone in a room she had promised to redesign and stared at his own hands and tried to remember the last time anyone had made him laugh. He couldn't. He made a note in his careful internal ledger that this was going to be a problem. He did not yet know how large a problem. He would find out. They both would. The first week inside the Voss estate taught Lena something she hadn't expected to learn. Silence in a house like this wasn't absence. It was a presence. It had texture. It sat in the corners of rooms and waited for you to fill it, and if you didn't, it filled you instead. She woke on her first full morning to the sound of nothing. No traffic, no upstairs neighbor, no pipes, just the faint hum of a climate system she couldn't see, and somewhere far down the hallway the soft click of a door closing with deliberate care. She lay still for a long moment, staring up at a ceiling that was too high and too white, and tried to remember where she was. Then she saw the ring on her finger, and she remembered all at once, the way you remember a bad diagnosis when you first wake up in the morning. She sat up. She breathed out. She said out loud to nobody, "Okay, day 1. Her suite was large enough that she could get lost in it. Bedroom, sitting room, a bathroom with a soaking tub she'd stared at the night before as if it were a trap. Dressing room. A private balcony overlooking a stretch of garden she had not yet walked in. Every piece of furniture was tasteful. Every piece of furniture was cold. A woman had lived in this room before. She could feel it in the way the closet had been organized. Adrian had not mentioned a woman. She did not ask. A soft knock at the sitting room door. She wrapped a robe around herself and opened it. "Good morning, Mrs. Voss." A young woman, maybe 25, with her hair in a tight braid and a tray in her hands. "My name is Sophia. I'll be bringing your breakfast most mornings, unless you prefer the dining room. Mr. Voss said to tell you the dining room is yours whenever you want it. He takes his own breakfast in the library at 7. He's already up." "He's always up, ma'am. He doesn't sleep much." Sophia said this the way one might comment on the weather, not gossip. A simple fact about the weather in this house. Lena filed it away. "Thank you, Sophia, and please don't call me ma'am. Lena's fine." Sophia's expression did not change, but her eyes flicked once, briefly, toward the hallway, and then back. "Mrs. Voss is fine too, ma'am." Lena understood then that there were rules in this house she was going to have to learn by accident. Sophia wasn't being cold. Sophia was being careful. Names, in this house, were not casual. Names had weight. A staff member who called the lady of the house by her first name could be, in some unseen calculation she didn't yet understand, putting herself at risk. "Mrs. Voss, then," Lena said gently. "Thank you for the breakfast, Sophia." Sophia set the tray down, bobbed her head once, and left. Lena ate at the small table by the window. Eggs, fruit, black coffee, a small folded note on heavy cream paper that read, in a tight masculine hand, "The contractors arrive at 10. I told them to speak to you." That was it. No preamble. No good morning. Just the practical sentence and a single initial. Lena almost smiled in spite of herself. It was, she suspected, the longest note Adrian Voss had written to a woman in a year. The contractors were, in fact, already there when she came downstairs at 9:45. 3 men in soft-soled shoes standing in the foyer with tablets and a rolled-up set of drawings. They looked up when she came down the stairs, and their posture changed in a way she recognized, the way contractors always stiffened when they realized the client was going to be a woman. She was used to this. Then their eyes moved past her, to Irene, who was standing near the door with her tablet, and their posture changed again, differently. They understood now whose house this was. "Gentlemen," Lena said, "I'm Mrs. Voss. The study on the east side of the first floor. Let's walk it." They walked it. The study was, she saw now in better light, a room that was trying very hard not to be alive. Dark wood paneling that had been chosen to absorb rather than reflect. Heavy drapery that strangled the south-facing windows. A massive partner's desk facing the wrong wall, oriented for a man who didn't want to see the door. A single stiff leather armchair for visitors. A Persian rug that was genuinely beautiful and genuinely filthy. Decades of foot traffic ground into the pile. No art, no flowers, no plants. A humidor on a side table that clearly hadn't been opened in months. She stood in the center of it and felt suddenly her own professional self click back on. It was like flexing a muscle she'd been afraid had atrophied. "I want the desk turned," she said. 30 degrees toward the window, not all the way. He doesn't want to face the door head on. I get that. But he's shutting out a view of his own garden. "I want the drapery pulled entirely and replaced with a light linen panel we can draw across when he wants it dark. I want the paneling cleaned and oiled, not stripped. I want a reading chair that isn't a statement. I want the rug taken out, cleaned, brought back. I want 2 lamps, warm bulbs, not cool. And I want a small second desk, lower, over there by the window, for me to work at when I'm in here with him. Because I will be in here with him." The lead contractor, a graying man with gentle eyes, made a note. "Ma'am, on the desk, Mr. Voss's desk is... He's particular about it. I've been told not to move it without written..." "It's written," Irene said behind her, without looking up from her tablet. "Mrs. Voss has unrestricted authority in the study. The safe doesn't move. Anything else is her call." The contractor nodded. He did not ask again. Lena caught Irene's eye, briefly, and saw something that was almost a smile there. Approval, maybe. Or recognition. One professional woman watching another remember who she was. She worked for 6 hours straight. She didn't notice the time passing. She didn't notice the ache in her back from standing. She didn't notice that somewhere around 2 in the afternoon, Adrian had rolled himself silently to the doorway and stopped there, just out of the room, just watching her. She noticed him when the contractor's eyes flicked past her shoulder and the man's spine went, almost imperceptibly, a little straighter. Lena turned. Adrian was in the hallway. He was in a charcoal sweater today instead of a shirt, sleeves pushed up, jaw shadowed with a day's worth of stubble. He looked, in a word, human, less like a man who held a city by its throat and more like a man who had not slept well. "Mr. Voss," the contractor said. "Gentlemen," Adrian's voice was quiet. "I trust my wife is being reasonable with you." "She's being very clear, sir." "That's her strength." He let his eyes move to Lena, and for a moment the room seemed to reorganize itself around that look. "Mrs. Voss, a word, when you can." "I can now." She set down the fabric swatch in her hand. "Gentlemen, please continue. Take the drapery down, start on the paneling, I'll be back." She followed Adrian into the hallway. He didn't go far, just to a quiet alcove near a tall window, where a bench had been built into the wall. Lena sat on the bench so she was at his eye level. She had begun doing this the night before, at dinner, without thinking about it. It put them across from each other instead of above and below. She had noticed, without saying anything, that Adrian had noticed. "You're working hard," he said. "I'm working normal. This is what normal looks like for me. I received a call this morning from a man named David Cole. He's a developer. He wanted to tell me that he intends to, in his words, give Hart Design a serious look for a 12-unit renovation in Brooklyn Heights. He asked me very politely whether I had any objections. He assumed, I think, that the firm might be a private project of mine, and that I might prefer it protected from real work." Lena went still. "What did you tell him?" "I told him the firm was not mine. I told him the firm was my wife's, and that if he wanted the job done, he should hire her on her merits or get out of her way. I told him if he used my name to give her an advantage, I would be personally offended. Adrian, I'm telling you this, he said, because I want to be clear. I am not going to stand in front of your career. I'm not going to hold doors open for you. I'm going to stand behind you where I belong in this arrangement. And if David Cole hires you, it will be because he was stupid enough to doubt you for 30 seconds and smart enough to get over it. That's all. She looked at him for a long time. Why? She said finally. Why are you being this careful about this? Adrian's gray eyes were steady. The line between his brows was deeper today. He was in pain, she realized. He hid it well, but she had been trained by her mother's last illness to read the small tells in men who didn't admit to pain, and she could see it now. The very slight whiteness at the knuckles of his resting hand, the slow way he was holding his breath between sentences. Because, he said, you did not ask me for this. I purchased you into this arrangement, Lena. I can dress it in whatever language I want. I can call it a contract. I can call it an opportunity. I can tell myself I offered you a choice. But the truth is, I found you at the bottom of a well, and I lowered a rope with conditions on it. The least I can do, in exchange, is not also take your work from you. She didn't know what to say. Also, he said, and his voice changed, a small note of dry humor in it that she was beginning to learn to recognize. You told me my study had no soul. I'm told you're correct. I would like you to be correct about other things too, professionally, publicly, loudly. You're going to regret telling me that. I regret a great many things, Mrs. Voss. Adding one more is a rounding error. She almost laughed. She didn't quite. Adrian. Yes. Are you in pain right now? He was quiet for a full 3 seconds. Yes, he said. No adornment, no minimizing. Is there anything I can do? No. Is there anything I cannot do? He looked at her, a little sharper. Meaning, are there things I shouldn't ask you to do or places I shouldn't ask you to go on days when it's like this? Meaning, if you have a bad day, will you tell me so I can stop pushing you to look at fabric swatches? He didn't answer for a long time. When he did, his voice was very low. No one has ever asked me that. Well, she said carefully, I'm your wife this week. I'm asking. He looked down at his hands. It's bad in the mornings, he said. And when the weather turns. If I ever tell you I need to end a conversation, it's not you. It's that I've used the fuel I have. I would rather not explain it more than that. You don't have to. Thank you. They sat in the alcove for another minute without speaking. A band of sunlight moved slowly across the floor between them. The contractors are waiting, Lena said eventually. Let them wait. They're billing by the hour. That's a good point. You're a terrible influence, Mrs. Voss. I'm your only influence at the moment. His mouth moved. That almost smile again. The one she was starting to suspect was the real one, the one the rest of the world never saw. Go, he said, before I keep you here all afternoon out of pure stubbornness. She went, but she felt him watching her all the way back down the hall. The second week she began to see the shape of his days. It was not a schedule so much as a fortress built of routine. He rose at 5:30. He swam in the pool in the east wing from 6 to 7, with Reyes nearby, because the water was the one place his legs still remembered they had been legs. He took breakfast in the library, reading 3 newspapers and 1 briefing folder that Irene brought him. Between 8 and 11 he met with people. These meetings happened in the second-floor office, the one she was not invited into. Some days it was 2 men in suits. Some days it was 1 old man in a cardigan who looked like he could have been a retired accountant, and who, Lena gradually understood from the way staff moved when he arrived, was not. Some days it was a woman in her 60s with an iron-gray bob who laughed louder than anyone else in the house, and who, Irene mentioned in passing, was called Aunt Marta by people who had earned the right, and Mrs. Calcanis by everyone else. At 11, the meetings ended. At 11:15, Adrian ate. Always the same thing, a clear broth, and a piece of bread, and half an apple. Lena thought this was absurd, and said so, and the next day, at 11:15, a bowl of broth appeared in front of her too, with a small dish of olive oil for the bread. And across the table, Adrian did not look up from his newspaper, but said, without inflection, "You objected. This is now your lunch also." "I didn't say I wanted it. I said it was absurd." "You'll get used to it." "I absolutely will not." "You will, Mrs. Voss, because it is what I eat, and I am not changing my lunch for you, and you made a point of telling me you would not eat alone in this house." "I did not say that." "Didn't you?" She had said exactly that 3 nights before at dinner, half joking, half not. She hadn't thought he'd been listening. He had been listening. He listened to everything. She ate the broth. It was, annoyingly, very good. The afternoons were hers. He did not ask where she went. She did not ask where he went. Some afternoons she walked the garden. Some afternoons she met with her new office manager, a sharp young woman named Priya who had already hired back 2 of Lena's old draftsmen and was rebuilding a client roster with the terrifying efficiency of someone who had been bored at her previous job. Some afternoons she sat in the half-redone study and watched Adrian work at his turned desk, both of them silent. Both of them aware of the other, neither of them commenting on the fact that he was getting more done with her in the room than he used to get done alone. Dinners were formal. He sat at the head. She sat at his right, not across the table. He had moved her place setting there on the second night without discussion. Sophia had placed it at the far end once, the traditional distance, a diplomatic wife's distance. Adrian had looked at the empty chair at the other end of the table for about 4 seconds and said, "No," to nobody in particular, and Sophia had moved the setting. They talked at dinner, not about work, not about the marriage, about small things, books, a documentary he had watched about the restoration of a cathedral in Spain, the way her mother had cleaned offices in Rochester and made Lena recite the names of architects while she worked, not because her mother cared about architects, but because she wanted her daughter to know the names of the people who built the rooms she was cleaning. "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Adrian said. "She was a pain in the ass. Those are the same thing in my experience." "Did your mother—" She stopped. She had not meant to ask. He considered her a moment over his wine glass. "My mother left when I was 9, he said. "She was a pianist, quite a good one. My father was not a man you stayed with. She didn't take me. I understand why now. I did not then. I'm sorry." "Don't be. We don't do sorry in this house. It's lazy." He set the glass down. "Your mother sounds like she stayed." "She stayed. Good for her. There was no judgment in it. There was something behind it. A kind of old, quiet envy, carefully packed away." She saw it and said nothing. She did not touch him that week. He did not touch her. They had not, in fact, touched since his hand had rested briefly on hers in the courtyard on the first day and the corner-of-the-mouth kiss at the judge's chambers. A strange thing was happening in the space between them. The not touching had begun to feel, somehow, louder than touching would have. She caught herself once at the doorway of the library, watching him read, and when he looked up, she felt heat rise in her throat for no reason at all. He noticed. He didn't comment. She left the room quickly and cursed herself on the stairs. The third week, she began to understand how dangerous his world actually was. It happened at dinner on a Thursday. Adrian had been short all afternoon, not with her, with everyone. Irene had come and gone from the office 3 times. Reyes, who was normally around the house at dinner, had been absent since lunch. At 7, a man Lena had not seen before arrived at the front door, spoke to Adrian for 2 minutes in the hall, and left. Adrian rolled into the dining room a few minutes later with a face like weather closing in. "Eat," he said. "I'll join you in a moment." She ate. He did not join her. When she found him an hour later in his second-floor office, the door for the first time was open. He looked up. "Come in," he said. She came in. She had not been in this room before. It was smaller than she expected, warmer. 3 screens on a desk, 2 of them showing security feeds, a sideboard with a bottle of something amber and 2 glasses, a single black-and-white photograph on the wall, an old man in a hat, unsmiling. His father, she guessed. She didn't ask. "Sit," he said, and gestured to the chair across from him. "I'm sorry about dinner." "Don't do sorry, it's lazy." He almost smiled. "Touché." He regarded her for a moment, then, "There was an incident tonight in Queens. One of my legal properties had a break-in. Nothing was taken. A word was spray painted on the inside of a loading door that was not supposed to be able to be opened from the outside. The word was a family name. It was a signal. It was meant for me. Lena's hands went cold in her lap. Are you in danger? Some. Not tonight. Not this week. These things move slowly, Lena. They're not like television. A man who wants me dead is not going to walk up to this gate with a gun. He is going to spend a year on it. He is going to test the walls. He will paint a word on a door to see if I flinch. If I flinch, he will paint another word, closer. If I don't, he will eventually give up or commit. Most of them give up. Most. He watched her carefully. I'm telling you this because I promised I would. You said you needed a real map. I did. Here is the map, tonight. A man I have not spoken to in 5 years wants me to know he is still alive and still angry, and still has people who can get inside a loading door in Queens without breaking a seal. My people are already in the building. We will know in 48 hours who it was. It will turn out to be some middle son of the Marchetti family who has been drinking and feels disrespected. It will be handled at a level that does not involve this house or you. I am almost certainly boring you with it. You're not boring me. He tipped his head, acknowledging. Lena. Yes. The gala is in 3 weeks. Every family in the Northeast will be there. The Marchettis will be there. I will be seen, and you will be seen next to me, and a dozen men in the room will be spending the night deciding whether the Voss house is stable enough to leave alone for another year, or whether it is a house with a visible weakness they can cut. She didn't speak. The visible weakness, he said, will be me, my condition, the chair. It has always been the visible weakness. For 6 years, my visible weakness has been my legs. He paused. He looked at her. After this gala, he said, my visible weakness will be you. Not because you are weak, because you are mine. In the eyes of a room full of people who hurt what is yours to hurt you. I am telling you this because you have the right to know before you stand in that room next to me. And because if you want to leave before then, we will construct a story that protects you, and I will honor every financial term of this contract as if it had run the full 18 months. Your firm will not suffer. Your debts will stay clear. You can walk. The room was very quiet. Lena looked at him, really looked at him. At the stubble on his jaw that he hadn't shaved, at the slight tremor in his left hand resting on the desk, which he had stopped bothering to hide in front of her. At the pale gray eyes watching her without pleading and without performance, a man laying out an account book honestly in front of the first auditor who had ever known how to read it. Adrian. Yes. Are you asking me to walk? No. Are you hoping I'll walk? He was silent for a long moment. Part of me is, he said quietly, because I have not yet figured out how to stand in a room and know that you are across it, and also know that you are a target because of me. Another part of me, the larger part, is hoping very much that you won't. She felt something move in her chest, something that was not gratitude and was not fear, and that she was not yet ready to call by its real name. I'm not walking, she said. Lena, I signed a contract, Adrian. I don't break contracts. Marcus broke contracts. I don't. This is not a line item. I know what this is. Her voice was harder than she'd expected. I know exactly what this is. You asked me when we sat in the courtyard the first day whether I'd survive this house. I told you I'd need a map. You've given me a map. You just handed me the only kind of map that matters, which is one drawn by somebody who isn't lying to me. I'm not walking, Adrian. I'm going to that gala. I'm going to wear whatever absurd dress Irene picks out for me, and I'm going to stand next to your chair, and I'm going to look at every single person in that room like I know something about them that they should be afraid I know. And some of them will believe it, and the ones who don't believe it will believe it by the end of the night, because I am very, very good at pretending, Adrian. I have been pretending my whole life that I wasn't drowning. Pretending I'm in love with a man I respect is going to be the easiest job I've ever had. She stopped. She heard what she had just said. So did he. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Adrian set down the pen he had been holding, very slowly. Respect, he said quietly. That's the word you used. That's the word I used. It's a serious word. I know it is. He looked at her for a long time. I am not going to do anything with that tonight, he said carefully. I'm going to put it somewhere safe and leave it there until I know what to do with it. I'm telling you I'm doing that because you asked for honesty in this house, and pretending I did not hear what you just said would be the opposite of honesty. Okay. Okay. They sat in the quiet together. It was not uncomfortable. It was the opposite of uncomfortable, and that was the frightening thing. Go to bed, he said finally. It's late. And tomorrow you have to pick out a dress, which, I am told by Irene, is the most exhausting activity available to a woman in this house. Irene is a menace. Irene is the only reason this house still stands. Respect her. I do. I know. A beat. Lena. Yes. Thank you for not walking. Don't thank me. It's lazy. This time, he laughed. Really laughed. For the second time since she had met him. A short bark of a sound, surprised out of him. It warmed something in her chest that she had not known was cold. She stood up to leave. At the door she turned back. Adrian. Yes. Your mother, the pianist. Do you still have any of her recordings? His eyes narrowed very slightly, not in anger, in something else. Surprise, maybe, at the question. A few, he said. I'd like to hear one. Sometime. Not tonight. Whenever. He was quiet. Then, all right. She left. She walked down the long hallway toward the east wing, her heels quiet on the runner, and she did not realize until she was inside her own suite with the door closed behind her that her heart was beating very hard. She sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at the ring. Respect, she thought. She had chosen the word carefully. She had chosen it because the true word, the one she had almost said instead, was too dangerous to speak out loud in this house, on this night, with 3 weeks until a gala where her face was going to be burned into the memory of every dangerous man in the Northeast. She was not ready to say the true word, even to herself, but she had felt it today, in the alcove. She had felt it tonight, in his office. She had felt it in the broth he had pretended not to change his lunch for. She had felt it every time he had, without comment, moved his whole life a fraction of an inch to make room for hers. She changed into pajamas. She climbed into a bed that was too large. She turned off the light. In the dark, in a house that had 3 weeks ago been a stranger's house, she found she was no longer afraid of the silence. She was afraid of what was growing inside it. The 3 weeks before the Halloran Gala moved the way bad weather moves over water, slow and visible, from a long way off. And by the time you understood the 3 weeks before the Halloran Gala moved the way bad weather moves over water, slow and visible from a long way off, and by the time you understood what you were looking at, it was too close to run from. Lena felt it in the house before she saw it on anyone's face. Reyes stopped parking the car in the courtyard and began parking it inside the covered bay. The gardener, an old man named Beau, who usually worked until 5, was finishing at 3 and leaving in a black SUV instead of his own truck. A new man appeared on the property one Tuesday, quiet, broad-shouldered, with a soldier's posture and a plain gray jacket, and neither Irene nor Adrian introduced him. He stood near windows. He never sat down. Lena asked Sophia about him on the 4th day, casually, passing the kitchen, and Sophia's eyes did the same small flick they had done the first morning, toward the hallway and back. "He's here for the house, ma'am," Sophia said carefully. "The house already has people." "He's here for the house now, ma'am." Lena understood. She didn't press. The dress arrived on her Friday, hanging in a long protective bag that Irene carried into Lena's dressing room herself, instead of sending up with one of the girls. It was, Lena had to admit when she unzipped the bag, a weapon. Deep wine-colored silk, long sleeves, a neckline that was high in the front and cut away dramatically in the back, a skirt that moved when she did and stayed quiet when she was still. Simple. Expensive. A dress that did not require jewelry but was going to get it anyway. "Mr. Voss chose the color," Irene said. "Did he?" Lena held the fabric up against herself in the mirror. "Should I be flattered or frightened?" "Both in this house." Irene's mouth twitched, the closest she came to a smile. "It's the color his mother wore at her last public performance. He mentioned it once years ago. He won't say it to you, I'm telling you, because you deserve to know what you're wearing." Lena stood still for a long moment. "Irene." "Yes, Mrs. Voss. Why are you helping me?" Irene did not answer right away. She folded the protective bag with slow, precise movements and laid it across the back of a chair. When she looked up, her steel-gray eyes were not warm, but they were not closed. "I have worked for Mr. Voss for 19 years, she said. "I worked for his father for 4 years before that. I have seen this house have 3 women in it, not counting his mother. 2 of them were told by his father what to wear. The third was a brief bad idea that ended in a contract buyout 12 years ago and should not have happened. None of them asked questions like the ones you ask. None of them looked at the staff the way you do. None of them moved a place setting." She paused. "I don't know what's going to happen between you and Mr. Voss, Mrs. Voss. I don't need to. I know what this house has looked like for 19 years, and I know what it has looked like for the last 3 weeks, and the second one is better. That's why I'm helping you." She walked out. Lena sat down on the dressing room bench and stared at the wine-red silk for a long time. The night of the gala, she was dressed by 6 and ready by 6:30 and sitting on the edge of her bed, still, at 6:40. She had told herself on the stairs on the way up that she was going to stop shaking by the time she came down. She had put on the dress. She had let the stylist Irene had sent pin her hair into something low and severe. She had put the ring on the correct hand. She had pressed the point of her heel into the carpet to test whether she could, in fact, walk in these. She could. She was still shaking. A soft knock at the sitting room door. "Come in." It was not Sophia. It was Reyes. "Mrs. Voss?" "Reyes. Mr. Voss asked me to come up. He'd like a moment before we go downstairs, if you're ready. He's in the library." "The library?" "Yes, ma'am. He wanted a quiet room first." She followed him down. She had been expecting the foyer, the ceremonial descent of the staircase, the whole fake performance of the married couple going to war in silk. She had not been expecting the library. She was grateful for the library. Adrian was in his chair by the fire. He had dressed in black, a slim tuxedo jacket, a dark shirt open at the collar. No tie. He had shaved. There were small silver cufflinks at his wrists that she had never seen him wear before. He looked up when she came in, and for a long moment he did not say anything. His pale gray eyes moved over her once, professionally, the way a tailor might look at a hemline, and then they moved over her again, not professionally at all. "Mrs. Voss? Mr. Voss? You look like a problem," he said quietly. She almost laughed. "Is that a compliment?" "In this house, tonight, it is the only compliment. Come here a moment, please. I have something for you." She came. She stopped in front of his chair. He reached into the pocket of his jacket and drew out a small velvet box and opened it without ceremony. Inside was a bracelet. Thin gold with a row of old stones that were not flashy but were, even by the firelight, obviously worth more than her apartment. A tiny clasp in the shape of a knot. "Put it on her, please," he said to Irene, who had materialized in the doorway at exactly the moment she was useful. Irene fastened the bracelet around Lena's wrist. "It was my grandmother's," Adrian said, "as was the ring. I want the room tonight to see that you are wearing 2 of her things. The people in that room will know what it means. It means I am not using you as a decoration. It means I am telling them, in a language they understand, that you are in this family as far as it matters to them to understand what it means." Lena looked at the bracelet on her wrist. She looked at the ring. She looked at the man in the chair. "Adrian." "Yes. I'm terrified." "I know. I need you to tell me something true before we go." He tilted his head. "Ask." "Are you terrified?" He considered her for a long moment. "Yes," he said simply. "Not of them. I know how to handle them. I am terrified of standing in a room while they look at you. That is the only part of tonight I do not know how to handle." "Okay. Okay. Okay. I can work with that." She breathed out once, slow. "I can go into a room knowing you're scared of the same thing I'm scared of. That's easier than going into a room alone." He looked at her like he wanted to say something else and did not say it. Instead, he put out his hand. Not toward hers, palm up, offered, an invitation, not a demand. She set her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers briefly, once. Warm, steady, the very faint tremor in his left hand not present here in the right one. "Let's go be married in public," he said. "God help them." Don't bring God into this house, Mrs. Voss. He has better things to do. She laughed, a short surprise sound, and the last of the shaking left her hands. The Halloran Foundation Gala was held at a hotel on the park, a ballroom that had been decorated for nothing in particular other than the display of money, and by the time Adrian and Lena arrived at 8:15 it was already full. Cameras, photographers. Not press, not tabloid. This room was closed to that kind of press. Private photographers. Men paid by families to remember faces. Lena walked in beside Adrian, her left hand on the armrest of his chair, her right hand loose at her side. She had practiced this walk in the house for 3 evenings. Irene had drilled her. Not too close because it looked pitying. Not too far because it looked reluctant. Slightly behind his shoulder on the entrance, to cede the room to him. Even with him once they were inside, to claim it next to him. The room noticed them. It was a strange, subtle sensation, like the air pressure in the ballroom dropped by a single degree. Conversation did not stop. No one turned visibly. But Lena, who had spent her whole adult life in rooms where she was either invisible or barely tolerated, had developed an animal's ear for the sound a room makes when it reorganizes itself around a new threat. This room made that sound now. Easy, Adrian said, very low, not looking at her. I'm easy. You're grinding your teeth. I am not. You absolutely are. Stop. She stopped. He was right. She had been. A man approached them almost immediately. Early 60s, white hair combed back, a broad, friendly face that had been broad and friendly in 1,000 photographs and 1,000 fundraisers. Senator something, Lena thought, and then Adrian's voice in her ear, quiet and precise. Former ambassador, current donor, harmless. His wife is the one you actually want to impress. She's at 10 o'clock in the blue. Got it. Ambassador Halloran, Adrian's voice louder now, warm in the public register. Thank you for having us. May I introduce my wife? Lena, Ambassador Halloran. Mrs. Voss? A pleasure. The ambassador's hand was warm and dry. I understand congratulations are in order. Adrian, you sly bastard. You kept this one quiet. She insisted, sir. She's a more private person than I am. Is that possible? Lena smiled. He's exaggerating his own shyness, Ambassador. He speaks to reporters every day. I'm the one who hides in the garden. The ambassador laughed, genuinely. You two are charming. I approve. Come find me later, Adrian. I want to talk to you about the Bergen Foundation. He moved on. Good, Adrian murmured. Very good. He liked you. That matters. How did I do it? You contradicted me lightly. He likes men whose wives are not afraid of them. He respects his own wife. You read that off him in 4 seconds. Keep doing it. She kept doing it. For the next 2 hours, she did the most exhausting work of her life. She met 14 men whose names Adrian had drilled into her in a single sitting the night before, and she matched each of them to the business they did legally and the business they did not, and she smiled at some of them and stayed cool with others. And she deflected 2 questions about her firm, and she accepted a glass of champagne she did not drink. She was introduced to Aunt Marta, who kissed her on both cheeks and called her kukla in Greek, which Lena understood from context was not an insult, and to 3 other women whose husbands Lena knew were very dangerous, and whose husbands, she sensed immediately, actually reported to these women in most things that mattered. Adrian was never more than an arm's length from her. He did not hover. He did not introduce her and drift. He stayed, his chair like a small black throne at her hip, and when she glanced down at him, which she did several times from habit more than need, she found that he was not looking at her. He was looking at the room. He was watching for her. Something was loosening in her chest as the night went on. A fear she had carried for 3 weeks was, against every expectation, beginning to look smaller, beginning to look manageable. They were pulling it off. He had told her the visible weakness tonight would be her, and in the first hour it had been her. She could feel it in the sidelong glances. But by the second hour, the sidelong glances had changed. They had become assessments, not hunts. Men were filing her away as someone to consider, not as something to use. She was reading it off every face in the room. And then, at 9:40, the Marchettis arrived. She knew them before Adrian pointed them out. 3 of them, 2 older men in gray suits and a younger one, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair slicked back, and the kind of face that had been handsome until it spent 10 years being pleased with itself. The younger one was the one her husband had described as the middle son 3 weeks ago. The one who had, in all probability, had the word painted on the loading door in Queens. He walked into the ballroom the way men walk into rooms when they are deciding to be rude in them. Niccolo Marchetti, Adrian said quietly. On the right. The 2 older ones are his uncles. They are not a problem tonight. He is. What's he going to do? He's going to walk over. He's going to be charming to you in a way that is not charming. He's going to try to find out what I've told you and what I haven't. If he touches me, I will handle it. If he touches you, Lena, you will step back exactly 1 step and let me handle it. Do not step in front of me. Do not speak for me. This room is watching. They need to see him fail, and they need to see me not need help to make him fail. Understood. Good girl. He said it without thinking. She heard it, and he heard himself saying it, and neither of them commented, and her pulse did something her pulse had no business doing in a room full of dangerous men. Niccolo Marchetti came over 3 minutes later. Adrian, his voice was warm and false. It's been a long time. Niccolo, you look well. You look married. That's new. It is. And you didn't invite me. I'm wounded. It was a small ceremony, Niccolo. Family only. That's what I hear. 11 people, I'm told. A judge in Westchester. Very intimate. Niccolo's eyes moved to Lena, and they did not move in a way she enjoyed. Mrs. Voss, Niccolo Marchetti, I've heard a lot. You've heard about 11 people's worth, Lena said pleasantly. Not much. Adrian did not move. Niccolo laughed, one short, surprised sound. She's quick. Adrian, she's quick. She is. May I? Niccolo was already reaching for her hand to kiss it, the way men did in very old movies to very young women. He did not actually want to kiss it. He wanted to lift it, look at the ring, look at the bracelet, make a calculation in front of a watching room. Lena let him take her hand. He lifted it. He did not kiss it. He turned it slightly to see the bracelet. His eyes flicked up to Adrian. Adrian's expression did not change. Niccolo turned her hand a little more, and now it was not respectful. It was a small, ugly thing, a public intimacy disguised as a greeting, and 50 people in the room had noticed. Lena did not step back. She did not look at Adrian. She squeezed, not her whole hand, her thumb, against the soft web between his thumb and forefinger. A hard, deliberate, perfectly calibrated pinch, in exactly the spot where every nerve in a person's hand converges. Niccolo's face changed. Let go of my hand, please, she said very quietly, so quietly that only he and Adrian and the 2 people directly behind him heard it. You're about to drop it anyway. He dropped it. He laughed, a little too loudly. Covering. His uncles had noticed. Aunt Marta, across the room, had noticed. The ambassador had noticed. Charming, he said. Adrian, she's a problem. She's my wife, Niccolo. Adrian's voice was absolutely level. Try not to forget that again in public. I won't forget it for you a second time. Niccolo's eyes went to Adrian, and there was, for the first time all night, a real flash of something in them. Not hatred. Something worse. A child's resentment, dressed up as an adult's threat. I heard about the Queen's property last month, he said. Terrible thing. Someone got into a locked door. I heard about it too, Niccolo. Your walls aren't what they used to be. My walls are exactly what they have always been. People who test them tend to find that out the hard way. Historically. It's a pattern. You might want to consider it. There was a beat. Niccolo smiled. Good to see you, Adrian. Mrs. Voss? He nodded stiffly. Enjoy your evening. He walked away. Lena did not breathe until he had crossed the ballroom. Mrs. Voss, Adrian said very softly. Yes. In about 15 seconds, we are going to be approached by the ambassador's wife, who is going to want to tell you how much she enjoyed what she just saw. You will be gracious. You will not laugh. You will not cry. You will not tremble. You will be absolutely calm. Do you understand me? Yes. I have never been prouder of anyone in my life. Don't. Don't say that now. I'll cry. Then I won't say it. But he reached up, as the ambassador's wife was approaching with 2 glasses of champagne and a delighted look on her face. and he laced his fingers through Lena's where they rested on the armrest of his chair. He did it without looking. He did it as naturally as if they had been a real married couple for 19 years. He did not let go for the rest of the evening. They stayed another hour. They danced in the only sense a man in a chair and a woman who loves him can dance, which is that she leaned down, her hand on his shoulder, and they moved together in a small, careful circle to a slow song while the room watched and pretended not to. They left at 11. They did not speak in the car. Lena was still not speaking when they got home. It was not that she didn't have anything to say. It was that everything she had to say was too large to begin. Adrian rolled into the library without asking her to follow. She followed. He went to the sideboard, poured 2 glasses of the amber whiskey she had seen in his office, and handed her one without looking. She took it. She did not usually drink whiskey. She drank it. "Sit," he said. "Please." She sat, not across from him, but on the arm of the couch nearest his chair. Her knee was 6 inches from his knee. The fire was low. The house was very quiet. "Lena." "Yes." "Take off the bracelet." She froze. "Adrian, please, just for a moment." Her hands moved. She unclasped the bracelet. She held it in her palm. "Look at it," he said. She looked at it. "Now look at me." She looked at him. He was not smiling. His gray eyes were very dark in the firelight, and the line between his brows was gone. "I'm not going to ask you to stay," he said. "I told you before the gala that if you wanted to walk, you could walk, and that is still true. The contract is still the contract. 18 months. You can run the clock. You can take the money and the firm, and my very sincere apology for every second I have asked you to spend inside this much risk." He paused. "But I'm going to tell you one true thing first, Lena, and then I'm going to give you the bracelet back, and you are going to put it on or not put it on, and I am not going to say another word about any of this tonight." She didn't breathe. "Tell me the true thing. I have not looked at another person in any real way since I was 31 years old. My body stopped, and something inside my head stopped with it. I told myself for 6 years that that stopping was a kind of peace. I was wrong. It was a kind of waiting. I did not know I was waiting, Lena, until you walked into my study in a gray dress and told me my desk was facing the wrong wall. I am telling you this because I do not know how to hide it from you anymore, and because I am not a man who lies to his wife, even if his wife is his wife on paper, because if I lie to her in the small things, I will lie to her in the large things, and we have an agreement about large things in this house." Bolt said. She could not speak. "You do not have to say anything," he said. "You do not have to feel anything. I'm not asking you to. I'm telling you where I am because you asked for a real map, and this is where I am on the map tonight. I am over here." He set his glass down. "Give me your hand, please." She gave him her hand. He took the bracelet from her palm and fastened it back onto her wrist himself, slowly, carefully, with his not quite steady fingers. When it was done, he did not let go of her wrist right away. His thumb moved once across the inside of her arm where the pulse was. Her pulse was not calm. He knew it was not calm. He had felt it. "I'm going to bed," he said, without looking up. "Stay as long as you like. Finish the whiskey. Drink mine, too. I don't need it. Good night, Lena." He turned the chair and rolled toward the door. "Adrian." He stopped. He did not turn. "Adrian, look at me." He turned. She stood up. She walked across the carpet. She knelt down, slowly and carefully, in the wine-red silk of her mother-in-law's favorite color, in front of his chair so that she was below him now instead of above, her face lifted to his. She put her hands on his, the one with the tremor and the one without. "I'm not going to say any of this out loud tonight," she said, and her voice was not steady either. "Because if I say it out loud, I have to mean it tomorrow, and I'm not ready to mean things tomorrow. But I want you to know I heard you. I heard every word. I want you to know I'm not walking. I was never walking. I told you before we went in. And I want you to know the thing I am not saying out loud. I am not saying out loud because it is too big for tonight, not because it isn't there." Boom. He closed his eyes. For one long, private second, Adrian Voss, a man who had, at the age of 31, taken 2 bullets in the back at a charity auction and had not wept in a hospital bed for the loss of his legs, and had not wept at his father's funeral 6 months later, and had not wept on the day his grandmother's will was read, and had not wept at the bottom of a pool at 6 o'clock in any morning of the last 6 years, closed his eyes in front of his wife, and something that was not quite a tear, but was in the same family, stood at the edge of one of them and did not fall. He opened his eyes again. "Okay," he said. "Okay." "Go to bed, Lena." "Okay." She got up slowly. Her knees were not steady. She walked to the door. She turned back at the threshold. He was still watching her. "Adrian." "Yes." "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," he said. She nodded once. She left. She walked all the way down the long hall to the east wing, and she closed her door behind her and she leaned against it. And in the dark, for the first time since she had lost the firm, since Marcus, since her mother, since everything, Lena Hart Voss put her face into her hands and let herself feel what she was feeling. It was not fear. It was not relief. It was the first clean thing she had felt in a year, and it was going to change everything, and she did not know yet what it was going to cost her to keep it. Across the house, in the west wing, in a dark room with a fire burning low, a man sat alone in a wheelchair and looked at the empty glass across from his, and for the first time since he had been a boy of 9, watching his mother leave through a front door, allowed himself, for one full uninterrupted minute, to want something he did not believe he had the right to want. Then he rolled himself to bed. He slept badly, for 4 hours. It was the longest stretch of sleep he had had in 6 years. Morning came slow and gray over the estate, the kind of late autumn morning where the sky could not seem to decide whether to commit to rain in the garden. Morning came slow and gray over the estate, the kind of late autumn morning where the sky could not seem to decide whether to commit to rain, and the garden outside Lena's window held itself very still, as if it too were waiting to see what she would do. She had not slept. She had lain awake in the dark for a long time thinking about a hand on her wrist and a tremor in a left thumb, and then she had slept for maybe an hour around 5, and then she had woken up with the same feeling in her chest she had gone to sleep with, and she understood, with a strange, clean certainty, that the feeling was not going away, and that she was going to have to decide what to do with it in the daylight instead of the dark. She went down to the library at 7:30. He was already there. He had a paper open and had clearly not read any of it. There was a second cup of coffee on the small table across from his, untouched, cooling. He had poured it before she came down. He had known she was coming. "Morning," she said. "Morning." She took the second cup. She sat across from him, not beside him. They had already chosen, without discussing it, not to pretend that last night had not happened. She was grateful for that. She did not think she could have handled pretending. "I meant what I said last night," she said. "I know. I need you to know I also meant what I didn't say." He set the paper down. "I know," he said quietly. "Okay. Okay." And that was it. That was the whole conversation. It was not a dramatic exchange. It was not a movie scene. It was two people who had been operating in the same quiet frequency for 6 weeks agreeing, in plain English, over cooling coffee, that they were going to stop pretending not to be in it. There was no declaration. There was no kiss. There was no scene. There was just the small acknowledgement, and then Adrian turned the paper back over, and Lena sipped her coffee, and the rain, which had finally decided, began to tap against the library windows. The house changed after that morning, in a way that was difficult to describe to anyone who had not been in it for the first 6 weeks. It did not become louder. It did not become sentimental. The staff did not start whispering. Adrian did not, as Lena had half feared and half hoped he might, start appearing at her door in the evenings. If anything, he was more careful with her now than he had been before. He had told her where he was on the map. He was not going to push her. He was going to wait for her to walk across, and he was going to do it without flinching for however long it took, because the man had a patience that had been forged during 6 years of not being able to stand up. But he did begin to let her closer to the rest of him, piece by piece. In small ways she did not see at first because he did not announce them. One evening he handed her a small leather folder across the dinner table and said, without looking up, "If you'd like to know where the money came from, before we met." I had Irene put together a summary. She opened it later, in her suite, and found a plain accountant's breakdown of every one of Adrian Voss's legitimate holdings, the dates they were acquired, the percentages they contributed to his income, And at the back, a single sealed envelope with her name on it and a short handwritten note that said, "This is what I don't put in writing. I'll tell you any of it, any night you ask. You don't have to open this." She didn't open it. She put it in a drawer. 2 weeks later, she would take it out and hold it for an hour without opening it and put it back. A month after that, she would take it out and read it, and cry a little, and understand him more, and love him a little more carefully. One afternoon, she walked into the library and found him listening to something, his eyes closed, his head back against the leather of the chair. A piano. Somebody very good, playing something soft, old. He heard her come in and did not open his eyes. "Evelyn Voss," he said. "Warsaw, 1988, bootleg, recorded by a friend of hers in the second row. I have 6 of these. This is the best one." Lena sat on the floor by his chair. She did not touch him. She put her elbow on the arm of the chair and rested her chin on the back of her hand, close enough that his thumb, if he had lifted it, would have brushed her temple. He did not lift it. He listened. She listened. The piece was a Chopin nocturne she half recognized, played with a kind of careful sadness that was not performative, the sound of a young woman who had not yet decided to leave her husband, playing it for a room full of strangers in a city she would never see again. She was 34 when she recorded this, Adrian said. She left my father 2 years later. She died when I was 23. I didn't go to the funeral. I thought I was punishing her for leaving. It turns out I was punishing myself for missing her. Adrian, don't be sorry, I told you. Sorry is lazy. I wasn't going to say sorry. I was going to say that's the saddest sentence you've ever said to me. A long silence. Yes, he said. It is. The music kept playing. She stayed on the floor until the recording ended. When it did, he opened his eyes and he looked down at her, and for a second she thought he was going to do something, touch her face, anything. He did not. He simply said, "Thank you for sitting with me for this." And she said, "Anytime." And then she got up and went back to her own office, and the space in the room where she had been felt enormous after she left, and he sat there looking at it for a long time. Winter settled in slowly. Lena's firm was, against every odd, not just surviving but thriving, and the thing about it that surprised her most was that Adrian had been right. He was not helping. Not by any measurable standard. The David Cole Commission had closed on her portfolio alone. 2 other developers had come to her on the strength of the Cole walkthrough. Priya had hired a 3rd draftsman, and then a 4th. Hart Design had an office in the Flatiron again, a real one, smaller than the old one, but in a better building. Lena spent 3 afternoons a week there. On the 4th afternoon, she was in court with the firm's attorney for the lawsuit against Marcus, which had, under very expensive legal pressure that Adrian had not directly applied, but which Marcus's lawyers had clearly understood was standing in the room, become a wire transfer from a Panamanian bank, followed by a formal apology that Marcus did not understand had been the cheap option. She did not gloat about it. She did not tell Adrian she appreciated it. She did not, in fact, mention it to him at all. But the night the settlement hit her account, she walked into the library without knocking, put her hands on the armrests of his chair, leaned down, and kissed him on the forehead. Once. Soft. She did not say anything. She walked back out. He did not say anything either. But when Sophia brought up her breakfast the next morning, there was a single white flower on the tray, out of season, and Sophia would not meet her eyes when asked about it, and Lena took the flower and pressed it between the pages of the book she was reading and cried for exactly 40 seconds in the bathroom, and came out smiling. Things between the 2 of them moved after that, in a different register. Not fast. Never fast. There was too much history in that house for fast. They began to sit closer at dinner. He began to read in the sitting room attached to her suite in the evenings, his chair pulled up by the fire, a glass of whiskey at his elbow, while she worked at the small desk she had installed there. Sometimes they did not speak for 2 hours. Sometimes they spoke about every small thing. He told her about his father, in pieces, always reluctantly. She told him about Marcus, in pieces, less reluctantly. He asked her one evening about the boy she had almost married at 26, and she laughed and said, "He became a dentist. He lives in Hartford. He was afraid of me when I was 26, and he would be absolutely terrified of me now." And Adrian said mildly, "I am not afraid of you, Lena." And she said, without looking up from her drawing, "I know. That's why we're sitting here. But, the The first time he kissed her, it was not a scene. It was not late at night. It was not in firelight. It was 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon in February, and she had come into the second-floor office without knocking to tell him that a pipe had burst in one of her Brooklyn projects, and she had to go. And she was already halfway into her coat, and he was at his desk reading something, and she was in the middle of a sentence about the pipe. And he looked up at her, and she stopped talking. He said, "Come here a minute." She came. He said, "I need to do something before you go. If you don't want me to, say so now." She did not say so. He took her hand and he turned it over, and he kissed the inside of her wrist, where the bracelet had been the night of the gala, slowly, once. Then he let her hand go. "Go fix your pipe," he said. "I hate you," she said, and it came out shaky. And it was the tenderest thing she had ever said to a man in her life. "I know," he said. She went to Brooklyn. She fixed the pipe. She did not think about a pipe all afternoon. When she came back that night, it was late, and he was asleep in his chair in the library with a book open on his lap, and she took the book from him gently. And she did not wake him, and she covered him with a throw, and she sat down on the floor by his chair, and she put her head against his leg. The leg she knew he could not feel, and she stayed there until he woke 40 minutes later, and found her there, and did not startle, and did not move, and did not speak, and instead put his hand, very carefully, on the top of her head. She cried, a little, silently, into his trouser leg. "Lena, I'm okay, don't. I'm okay." "What is it?" "I'm happy. It's unfamiliar. I'm adjusting." He made a small sound that was almost a laugh and was almost something else. "Get up here," he said. She got up. She was not a small woman. He was not a man who could, anymore, catch her if she fell. They had together worked out the architecture of his body over the last 6 weeks, not in conversation, but in accidental practical learning. The way she knew to stand on his right and not his left when they were still, the way he knew to use the chair's arms as a brace, the way they had together, twice, found positions in which she could lean down across the chair without his left side catching pain. They used what they had learned. She slid one knee onto the arm of the chair, and then the other, and then she was in his lap, carefully. Not a girl in a boy's lap. An adult woman settling herself on the adult man who had waited 6 years and would have waited 6 more. And his good hand came up to the back of her neck, and his pale gray eyes were very dark, and he did not say anything, and neither did she. He kissed her. It was not their first kiss. The kiss on the wrist had been their first kiss, in the only way that counted. This was their second. It was slower. It was careful, in the way people who have both been hurt are careful. Her hands went to the collar of his shirt and then to his jaw, and then she pulled back for a second and pressed her forehead to his. "Adrian." "Yes." "I am not going to walk at 18 months. "I know. I need to say it out loud. I need you to hear me say it with my actual mouth." "I'm listening." "I am not going to walk." "I heard you." "I am going to stay in this house until you ask me to leave it, which you are not going to do, because you are not that stupid." "I am not that stupid." "Okay. Okay." She kissed him again. They did not sleep together that night. It would be another 3 weeks before they did, and when they did, it would be complicated and careful, and not like any scene in any movie, and both of them would laugh at one point, quietly, because their bodies had not read the script. And she would wipe her eyes afterward, and he would say, very softly, "Don't." And she would say, "I'm not crying because it was bad, Adrian. I'm crying because it was good. Try to keep up." And he would laugh too. Really laugh. The laugh she was now the only person in the world who had ever heard. And the room would be warm, and the tremor in his left hand would be gone, and they would sleep in her bed, which was closer to the ground. And in the morning, Sophia would knock on the door with a tray for 2 and set it down without comment and go. And the house would absorb the fact of them without flinching, the way the house had absorbed every other fact for 100 years. Irene would say nothing. She would, however, quietly reorganize the linens. All of that was still ahead of them that Tuesday evening when she was sitting in his lap in the library. They did not know it yet because they were not ahead of themselves. They were in the chair. They were in the chair for a long time. They lived a winter. They lived a spring. Spring was harder than the winter. The winter had felt like a secret they were keeping in a warm room against the weather. Spring was when the world started coming back toward them, and they had to start making decisions about how much of this they were going to let the world see. There was the question of Adrian's business. She had known, signing the contract, that she was marrying a man who did things that were not legal. She had told herself she would not ask. She had told herself the silence was the deal. The silence held for a long time. It did not hold forever. One evening in March, Reyes came to the house with a split lip and a bandage on his wrist and would not tell her what had happened. And Adrian, after a meeting that lasted until almost midnight, wheeled into the sitting room where she was waiting and said, without preamble, "I'm going to tell you a thing. I'm going to tell you because you are my wife, and because there is an ugly version of this that is going to be in the news in 2 days, and I do not want you to read about it in the news." She listened. He told her. Not everything. He was not that stupid, and he did not pretend to be. But more than he had ever told her, or told anyone. About a shipment that had been intercepted. About a man who had given them up to an agency. A man who had worked for Adrian's father before Adrian. About the decisions that had been made about that man in the last 72 hours. He did not say what the decisions were. He did not have to. She understood. She understood because she was not a fool, and she had agreed to marry him, and she had not agreed to marry a man with clean hands. She did not, at that moment, know what she felt about the decisions. "Lena, I'm thinking. Take your time." She took it. She took a lot of time. She sat on the couch and she looked at the fire and she thought about her mother and about Marcus, who had stolen from her and had not been hurt for it because she had not had the reach to hurt him, and about the kind of world Adrian lived in, where reach was the currency people died over. "Adrian, yes, I'm going to say one thing, and then I'm going to stop, and I'm not going to ask about this again for a long time, maybe ever. Okay. Okay. I know what you are. I've always known what you are. You did not trick me. You sat in your study the first day we met, and you told me you had killed people, and you told me you would kill people again, and I signed a piece of paper, and I came into your house. That is my signature on that paper, not yours. That is me here in your house, not you dragging me here. I want that on the record. I have not been tricked. I made a decision. I'm still making it. Lena, let me finish. Finishing. But, she looked at him. I need you to promise me one thing. I need you to look me in the face and promise me, and you are going to keep this promise. Because if you don't, I'm going to walk out the front door, and I am not going to come back. And I am not saying that to hurt you. I am saying it because I know myself. Okay. Okay. I need you to promise me you will never lie to me about what you are doing. If you're about to do something and you can't tell me what it is, you say, I can't tell you what it is. You do not say nothing. You do not say business. You do not make me ask a question and then walk out of the room. I am not your father, Adrian. I am not the women your father had in this house. I can hear things. I am very hard to scare. What I can't handle is being treated like a child by a man I am building a life with. That is the thing I can't handle, so promise me. He looked at her for a long time. I promise. Say the whole sentence. I promise I will not lie to you about what I am doing. I promise that when I cannot tell you, I will say that I cannot tell you. I promise I will not treat you like a child in my own house. Okay. Okay. Come here. He came. She pulled him as close as the chair would allow and put her forehead against his and closed her eyes and breathed. He put his hand on the back of her neck. They did not speak for a long time. She did not ask about the man who had talked to the agency again. She did not read about him in the news 2 days later. She did not look for the story. She did not need to. She knew. She had known the day she signed the paper. She had known the day he told her about the loading door in Queens. She had known. Knowing was not the same as not knowing and pretending to know. Knowing was knowing. She had been an adult when she walked into his house, and she was going to be an adult inside it. The spring turned into summer. The contract had started in October. The contract was going to end on paper in March of the following year. Lena began sometime in May to notice that no one in the house was mentioning the contract anymore. Not Irene, not the attorney, not even, quietly, herself. It was as if the contract had become a piece of furniture that everyone was walking around. It was there, it was on the schedule, it was on the calendar, It was in a drawer in a manila folder in Adrian's second-floor office. But it was no longer a thing anyone in this house was planning their emotional life around. Except Lena realized one evening it might be. Quietly. Somewhere. Because Adrian had started doing a strange thing. He had started, every few nights, bringing up, in careful neutral language, the question of what Lena would do after. Where she would live, whether she would keep the firm in the Flatiron or move. What she wanted her 30s to look like. Whether she wanted children, and whether she had ever wanted children, and whether she had given up wanting children, and whether, if she still wanted children, she wanted them in a house with a man who could not, realistically, be the kind of father who plays with them on a floor. She answered his questions. She did not refuse to, but she started to understand with a dread that gathered slowly and then all at once what he was doing. He was giving her an exit. He was doing it gently. He was doing it the way a man who loves a woman gives her an exit when he has decided, privately, that the right thing for her is not him. On a Friday night in late June, she came into the library and found him with the manila folder open on the desk in front of him. He closed it when she came in, but he was not fast enough, and she saw what he had been looking at. The last page. The dissolution clause. The one where the marriage could be ended by either party with 30 days written notice in the final 90 days of the term. He did not try to hide what she had seen. Lena. No. Lena, sit down, please. No. I have been thinking. I know what you have been thinking, Adrian. I am not stupid. I have been watching you think it for a month. I am not going to sit down. You are going to stand up. You are going to roll over here. You are going to close that folder, and you are going to put it in a drawer, and you are going to tell me what you were about to do. He closed the folder. He rolled over. He looked up at her. I was going to offer you, he said quietly, in about 2 weeks, the ability to end this now, with every financial protection of the full term. The firm is stable. Your name is back. I had a conversation with my attorney last week about a standing arrangement, a kind of silent protection clause that would keep certain attentions off you and the firm for the foreseeable future, whether or not you are still in this house. It would cost me nothing. It would give you everything. You could walk in July and be safer than you were when you came in October, and freer, and your career would not suffer a single scratch. And you would what? I would be fine, Lena. You would be fine. I would be fine. She stared at him. She felt her eyes burning. She was not going to cry. She was not going to cry in this room tonight. She was going to say the thing she had not said out loud yet, because apparently he was going to make her say it out loud, because apparently he was too much of a coward to say it first, a man who had looked down the barrel of a gun and had not blinked, a man who had told Niccolo Marchetti across a ballroom that his walls were what they had always been, and he was, in this one specific arena, in his own library, with his own wife, an absolute and perfect coward. Adrian Voss? Yes? I love you. He closed his eyes. I love you, you idiot. I have loved you since the first Tuesday you changed your entire lunch for me and lied about it. I have loved you since the night I pinched Niccolo Marchetti's hand in a ballroom and you called me a good girl in front of 3 senators. I have loved you since the afternoon you kissed the inside of my wrist before I went to go fix a pipe. I have loved you since I sat on the floor of this library and listened to your mother play Chopin. And I understood Adrian. I understood what kind of boy you were before you became whatever you are now. And I loved that boy. And I love the man. And I am not walking out of this house in July, Adrian. I am not walking out of it in March. I am not walking out of it next year. And you do not get, Adrian, to be so afraid of loving me that you decide to love me out the front door. Do you hear me? She was crying. She had been so sure she wasn't going to. He opened his eyes. They were wet. Lena. What? I hear you. Good. Come here. No. Come here. No, Adrian, you come here. You come here. You roll across this room. I am not moving an inch. I want to see you do it. He rolled across the room. He took her hands. He pulled her down to him, and she went, because she was always going to go. He put his forehead against her forehead, and he breathed her in, and he said very quietly into her hair, "Don't go." I wasn't going. I told you months ago I wasn't going. I know. I forgot. I'm a man who forgets. You don't forget anything, Adrian. You are the least forgetting man I have ever met. I forgot this. I forgot I was allowed to keep you. She put her hands on either side of his face. She tipped his head back. She looked at him. He was 41 years old. He had gray in his hair. He had fought for his life twice in that ballroom she had watched him hold together with his voice and his eyes and the slight tilt of his chin. He had never once in his adult life, until her, been told he was allowed to keep something. You are allowed to keep me, she said, and I am going to need you to remember it. I am going to need you to remember it every month for the rest of my life. I am going to remind you. I am going to tell Irene to remind you. I am going to pay Sophia in small amounts of cash to remind you. Are we clear? We are clear. Good. She kissed him. Hard this time. Angry. A little. A kiss like an argument won. He kissed her back like a man who had finally stopped being afraid. Outside the library, the summer was thick and green. Somewhere out on Long Island Sound, a boat was going somewhere. In a house in Queens, a man was alive who would not have been alive a year ago. In a building in the Flatiron, Lena's firm was, as of the last quarterly report, worth more than it had been at its peak under her old partner. In a cemetery in Rochester, her mother's headstone had been cleaned and had a fresh bouquet on it that Lena had arranged to have replaced every 2 weeks, for the rest of her life. Adrian had set that up in January without telling her. She had found out by accident in April. She had not yet thanked him for it. She would never thank him for it. It was, she understood, the biggest and most permanent love letter any man had ever written her. Inside the library, Lena Voss was in her husband's lap again, in his chair, with her forehead against his, and they were not talking anymore. There was going to be more to fight. There was always going to be more to fight, in a life like his, in a world like his, with a ring on her finger that had belonged to a woman who had once played Chopin in Warsaw and left a husband anyway. But they were going to fight it from inside the same house. They were not going to walk. Neither of them was going to walk. Not in March. Not ever. They did not, in the end, make it all the way to the quiet life they had begun to let themselves imagine in June. They did not, in the end, make it all the way to the quiet life they had begun to let themselves imagine in June. The world had not agreed to the timeline. The world rarely does, when it comes to men like Adrian Voss and the women who choose to stand next to them on purpose. It started, as these things always did in that house, with a small thing, a missed shipment, a courier who did not arrive at the warehouse in Red Hook at the time he was supposed to, and whose phone was, when they checked, at the bottom of the East River with a hole through the battery. Adrian came into the library on a Saturday morning in early August, and she knew the moment she saw him that they were going to have a week. "Talk to me," she said. She was already putting her coffee down. "I can't tell you much." "Tell me what you can." "Someone is moving against me. I don't know who yet, not officially. Irene thinks it's the Marchettis. I think it's a new arrangement. 2 families, maybe 3, sharing the cost. They've been careful. They've been patient. They've been watching the house for a long time." "How long?" "Since the gala." "Oh." She understood. "A year." "Lena, I'm not going anywhere. I haven't asked you to. You're thinking about it. I can see it in your face. You're doing the thing." "The thing?" "The thing where you figure out how to keep me safe by removing me. I can see you doing it. Stop doing it." He almost laughed. He almost didn't laugh. His hand, the left one, had the tremor in it badly today. "I need you to go to your office this week," he said carefully. "I need you to go in on your normal days. I need you to do your normal work. I need you to come home on your normal schedule. I don't want you out in the city at night. I don't want you in any of the boroughs after dark for a week. I want Reyes on you whenever you are not on this property." "Reyes is on you." "I have others. I have people you have not met. I am sending one of them with you. His name is Andre. You will like him. He has a daughter your age. He used to teach mathematics at a university before he made different choices. He does not speak unless spoken to. You will not have to entertain him." "Adrian?" "Yes." "Are you going to be on this property this week?" Pause. "No." "Where are you going?" "Lena, you promised me." He closed his eyes. He had promised her. In March. In the sitting room. After he had told her about the man who had talked to the agency. He had promised he would not lie to her about what he was doing. He had promised that when he could not tell her, he would say so. He opened his eyes. "I'm going to Philadelphia for 2 nights," he said. "I'm going to a meeting in a house that is not mine with 6 other men, one of whom is, I suspect, already working against me. I am going because if I do not go, it will be read as fear. If I go and come back, the group will hold. If the group holds, we have time to find out who is moving against me, and we handle it quietly. If I do not go, we handle it loudly, and loud is when people die who should not. And if one of those 6 men decides to handle it in the house in Philadelphia, that is the arithmetic of the trip, Lena. What are the numbers? 80-20, I come back. That's a bad 80. It's the best 80 I have this week." She looked at him for a very long time. "I hate you." "I know. I'm going to kiss you now, and then I'm going to go upstairs, and I'm going to call Priya, and I'm going to move 3 meetings off this week so that I am not in Brooklyn when you are in Philadelphia. Because if the phone rings with bad news, I do not want to be crossing the Manhattan Bridge in traffic with my hair on fire. Do you understand me?" "I understand." She kissed him. Hard. The kiss of a woman who had been a wife on paper for 10 months and a wife in truth for about 10 weeks and had not yet had a single uncomplicated day of either. Then she went upstairs. She called Priya. She moved the meetings. Then she sat on the floor of her bathroom with the door locked for 22 minutes, and she did not cry, because she had decided on the way up the stairs that she was not going to cry about this until it was over, one way or the other. She put her hand over her mouth, and she breathed, and she thought about her mother. About the night her mother had sat at their kitchen table in Rochester and written out the checks to Columbia with a hand that had been aching for a week, and had not told anyone, because telling anyone would mean going to a doctor, and going to a doctor would mean a bill they could not afford. That was what women in Lena's family did. They did not cry in the bathroom. They did the arithmetic. They put the kettle on. They waited for the bad news to become one kind of news or the other, and then they dealt with it. She did not cry. She went downstairs. She kissed him again, more gently this time, at the door. She watched the black car leave the courtyard. She waved, a small ordinary wave, the kind a wife gives a husband who is going on a business trip to talk about quarterly numbers, not the kind a wife gives a man who has told her plainly that the odds of coming home are 4 in 5. 80-20. She repeated it to herself for the next 48 hours, like a prayer she didn't believe in. André was in fact very quiet, and she did, in fact, like him. He drove her to the Flatiron office on Monday morning. He sat in the lobby with a paperback biography of a Russian composer she had never heard of. He drove her home at 5. He did not speak to her unless she spoke first. When she thanked him for the ride, he nodded and said, in a heavy accent, "Of course, Mrs. Voss." That was the whole of their Monday. On Monday night, Adrian called her at 10. He did not say much. He did not need to. He said, "Still 4. It was their code. 4 and 5. 80-20 was still 80-20. The meeting had gone to dinner. Dinner had gone to cigars. The 6 men were still 6. He was going to sleep in the guest wing of the house that was not his, and he would call her in the morning. "Adrian?" "Yes." "Stay alive until the morning." "I intend to, Mrs. Voss." He hung up. She did not sleep well. Tuesday was worse. Tuesday she was in a meeting with a client at 11 when her phone began to buzz against her thigh, and she had to sit through the next 40 minutes of a conversation about millwork samples before she could step out and check it. And it was not Adrian, it was Irene, and the text was one word: delayed. Lena excused herself from the meeting. She walked down one flight of stairs. She sat on a bench in the stairwell, which smelled faintly of old paint and fresh cleaning chemicals. She typed back, "Define." The reply came 30 seconds later. "The group is held. He is in the house. He has not left the house. He was scheduled to leave at 10. It is noon. Drivers are waiting. Is he hurt?" "No, he is in a room. The room has people in it. He has been in the room since 9, for 3 hours. For 3 hours, Mrs. Voss." Lena looked at the phone in her hand. She breathed. She thought about the day, very early, when Adrian had said to her in the alcove outside the study, "I am not a man who promises things he can't deliver." She thought about the night at the gala, when he had said to her across a fire in the library, "I have not looked at another person in any real way since I was 31 years old." She thought about the evening she had been sure she was not going to cry, and then had stood in the library and cried, and he had rolled his chair across the room, and he had said to her, "Don't go." She thought, he is not going to die in somebody else's house in Philadelphia on a Tuesday. Not because the odds said he wouldn't. The odds were the odds. The odds were 4 and 5. Because she had decided. She was not a woman who usually decided the shape of the world. She was an architect. She knew the limits of what you could make the world do. You could not make a beam hold weight it was not built to hold. You could not make a roof stop leaking by wanting it to. She had spent her whole professional life looking at reality and accepting it. But she had also, she realized, sitting on that bench in that stairwell, spent the last 10 months building a marriage out of things that were not supposed to hold weight. A contract, a fake wedding, a ring that had belonged to a dead grandmother, a man in a chair, a woman at the bottom of a well. And that marriage had somehow held weight that no engineer in the world would have said it could hold. She was not going to let it collapse now. She texted Irene, "Keep me on." She went back into the meeting. She finished it. She smiled. She answered questions about millwork. She did not look at her phone. When the meeting ended at 1:15, she walked out into the lobby, and Andre was there, and she said, very calmly, "Home, please." And he said, "Yes, Mrs. Voss." And he did not ask why. At 2:50, on the drive up the parkway, her phone buzzed in her lap. The text said, "He is out. He is in the car. He is fine. Home by 7. She put her phone face down on the seat beside her. She put her hand on top of it. She looked out the window at the gray-green trees of the Sawmill River Parkway. She did not cry. She had been practicing not crying since Saturday. She was, by now, very good at it. She closed her eyes. "Mrs. Voss? I'm okay, Andre. I'm fine." "I understand." There was a pause. Then Andre said in his heavy accent, without looking at her in the mirror, "He is a good man, in his way." Lena opened her eyes. "Thank you, Andre." "You are welcome, Mrs. Voss. I do not usually say this to the wives. I said it today because I was watching you since Saturday. You did not cry. My wife did not cry in 1994. It is the same. You are good for him. I will not speak of it again." He did not speak of it again. Not that day. Not ever. But Lena carried that sentence in her chest for the rest of her life. You are good for him. In the voice of a Russian mathematician who had chosen a different career, and it became quietly one of the 3 or 4 most important things any man outside her marriage ever said to her. Adrian came home at 6:40. She was in the courtyard. She did not run to the car. She had thought, in the car on the way home, that she might. In the event, when the black car pulled through the gate and stopped in front of her, she did not run. She walked. She walked the way a woman walks toward a husband who has been to the grocery store, not the way a woman walks toward a husband who has spent the last 3 hours inside the 4 and 5. Reyes got out first. Then the passenger door opened and Reyes was already around the car with the chair, and the transfer happened, and Adrian's head came up as he settled into his chair, and his gray eyes found hers across the 6 feet of cobblestone, and he was tired. She could see it in his face, tired in a way that went all the way down to wherever the tiredness lived in him, and she stopped 3 feet away from him, and she said, "Hi." "Hi? How was Philadelphia?" "Long. Did you eat?" "Not really." "Okay. Come inside. Sophia made something. I'll sit with you." He rolled. She walked beside him. She did not touch him in the courtyard. She did not touch him in the foyer. She did not touch him in the hallway. She waited until they were in the library with the door closed, and he was in his spot by the fire. And then she sat down on the floor in front of his chair, and she put her forehead on his knee, the one she knew he could not feel, and she stayed there. He put his hand on her head. "I'm home. I know." "Lena, don't. Not tonight. Don't tell me any of it tonight. Tomorrow. Tell me any of it you want to tell me tomorrow. Tonight I just want to be where you are. Is that okay?" "That's okay." She stayed on the floor. He stayed in the chair. At some point, Sophia knocked and came in with soup on a tray for 2, and she saw them, and she did not make a face, and she did not comment, and she set down the tray and she went out, and Lena ate her soup on the floor by his chair, and Adrian ate his soup in the chair, and they did not talk. They did not need to talk. They had talked already, in all the silences of all the weeks before this one. The silences had become a language. When the soup was gone, he said very quietly, "I need to tell you something tomorrow." "Okay." "It's not bad. I don't think it's bad. I want you to sleep first. Okay. She slept in his room that night for the first time. He had, over the summer, slowly adjusted the west wing so that the suite at the end of the hall had been made into a room a second person could actually live in, not a room that had been designed for a man who was alone. It had been done without ceremony. A larger closet, a second set of drawers, a small writing desk by the window, a chair by the bed, the height of his chair so that the transfer worked. Lena had not commented on any of it. It had been done. She had begun to leave a robe there, then a toothbrush, then a book. The process had taken 3 weeks, and neither of them had named it. That night, after Philadelphia, she did not leave. She slept on her side, facing him. He slept on his back because his back was the only way he could sleep. His hand found her hand sometime in the middle of the night and did not let go. In the morning, she woke before him, which almost never happened, and she watched him sleep for a full 4 minutes in the gray early light. His face in sleep was, she realized, the face of the boy whose mother had left him when he was 9. All the hardness that ran his waking hours was a construction that he took down, only at night, only in this bed, only now in front of her. She understood, watching him, that she had married the construction, and then, over 10 months, had been introduced to the boy, and that the boy was the husband, and that the construction was the job. He opened his eyes. Good morning. Good morning. I owe you a conversation. Yes, you do. Coffee first. Coffee first. They had coffee in bed. He sat against the headboard. She sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed, facing him. The light through the window was still early and soft. He took a breath. I'm going to step back, he said. She did not speak. She waited. Not immediately, not all at once. Over 18 months to 2 years. I have been thinking about this for a long time. I started thinking about it on the night of the gala, when Niccolo Marchetti lifted your hand. I have been thinking about it every day since. I did not know how to do it until the summer. I think I know how to do it now. Adrian, let me finish. Finishing. I am not going to leave the things I do. Most of them. I'm going to keep the holdings. I'm going to keep the legitimate businesses. I am going to keep my name on certain buildings and certain streets and certain relationships, because to take my name off of them would create a vacuum that would get people killed, including possibly you. But the operational role, Lena, the one that put me in a room in Philadelphia with 6 men where the odds were 4 in 5, that role I am going to put into other hands. Aunt Marta's hands, specifically. She has wanted it for 10 years. Her nephews are ready. The council will accept her because she has been there longer than any of them, and because she is frightening, and because she is not married to a woman they want to hurt. Lena's eyes filled. She did not let them do more than fill. Adrian, I will still be at risk. I'm not going to pretend I won't be. Men like me do not retire cleanly. We retire by inches. I am giving you inches, Lena. I cannot give you a clean life. I can give you inches over years, and if you are willing, at the end of the years, we will have a thing that looks, from the outside, almost like the life of 2 people who met at a dinner party and fell in love slowly. I know it is not enough. I know it is not what you deserve. I am offering it to you because it is what I have. She was not going to cry. She was not going to cry. She was not going to... Adrian. Yes. That's the best thing any man has ever said to me in my life. I thought you might cry. I am crying, you idiot. I'm crying quietly. There's a difference. He laughed. The real laugh. The one that was only hers. Come up here. In a minute. I have to say something first. I have to say it while my face still works. Okay? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She took a breath. She had thought about this speech, in pieces, for months. She had not expected to give it in a bed at 7 in the morning after Philadelphia. She gave it anyway. I did not want this life, she said. I want you to know that. When I walked into your study, I was not looking for this. I was looking for rent money. I signed your contract because I had run out of other options, and because a part of me, the part of me that my mother built before she died, was curious about what kind of man offered the deal you offered. I walked into this house, Adrian, on one of the worst days of my life, because I had nothing left to protect, and therefore nothing left to lose. That is the truth of who I was on day 1. I know that. Let me finish. Finishing, I fell in love with you in a way I did not choose to. I did not decide to. I'm going to be honest with you, I was irritated about it for about 2 months because I had not come into this marriage to fall in love with the terrifying man in the chair. I had come in to do the job and do it well and walk out in March. The falling in love was something that happened to me while I was doing the job. I was not a willing participant in the falling. I was a witness. He was watching her. He was very still. But I want to be clear about the next part, Adrian, because this is the part that matters. The falling was not a choice. The staying is a choice. I am choosing to stay. I was choosing to stay in June when I told you I was not walking in March. I am choosing to stay this morning. I will choose to stay every morning for the rest of our lives, and on most of those mornings, I will not have to think about it. It will be automatic. It will be the weather. It will be what we do. But on the hard mornings, on the mornings when you are in Philadelphia, on the mornings when someone writes a family name on a loading door in Queens, on the mornings when the tremor in your left hand is bad and you will not meet my eyes, on those mornings I will still be choosing. And I want you to know, I need you to know, that I know what I am choosing. I am not being tricked. I am not being dragged. I am not being seduced by the house or the money or the sentence Mrs. Voss or the gold bracelet or any of it. I have chosen of my own adult will the man. You, the man. And I will keep choosing him. And if we get 20 years of this life, I will have chosen him 7,300 times. And if we get 5, I will have chosen him every day of the 5. Is that clear? What? Lena. Is that clear, Adrian? That is clear. Good. Come up here. Coming. She crawled up the bed. She settled next to him. He put his arm around her. For a long time they did not speak. Then he said very quietly, I was wrong last year, when I told you in my study that I was not capable of romance. I was wrong about myself. It turns out I am capable of it. It just takes me a long time to say it. You did okay just now. Did I? You did more than okay. You did the best any man has ever done in this house. That is a low bar, Lena. Adrian. Yes, raise it. I'll raise it. I'll raise it every year. I promise. I know you will. They stayed in bed for another hour. It was unusual for him. He was not a man who stayed in bed. It was the first morning, Lena thought later, of the new arrangement. The new Adrian. The one who was going to, over the next 18 months to 2 years, get smaller as a dangerous man and larger as a husband. The process would not be clean. There would be nights when the old Adrian had to come out of the drawer, suit on, face set, and handle a thing that could not be handed down yet. There would be a morning in October where she would find a fresh bruise on his forearm, and he would say, simply, "It's handled," and she would not ask more, and she would kiss the bruise, and that would be the end of it. There would be a Christmas where Aunt Marta would come to dinner with her nephews and her sister's husband and 7 other people Lena had slowly learned to address correctly, and there would be laughter in the dining room for the first time in a decade. And Adrian would, at one point, lean over to Lena and say, without quite looking at her, "I can't remember the last time this house was loud." And Lena would say, "Get used to it." And he would say, "I will." There would be the night, in February of the next year, when the contract's term would officially have expired, when Lena would come home from her office and find Adrian waiting for her in the foyer with a manila folder in his lap, the same folder, the one that had been in his drawer for 17 months. He would hold it up to her. He would say, "It ran out at midnight last night. I didn't sign the dissolution. I didn't draft a new one. I don't want one. Do you want one?" And she would say, "No." And he would say, "Good," and hand her the folder, and she would take it, and she would walk into the kitchen, and she would set it in the sink, and she would light it on fire, and they would watch it burn. And Sophia, who had been there for the whole year and a half, would walk in, see the small, neat fire in the stainless steel sink, walk out without comment, and come back in 5 minutes with a bottle of the amber whiskey and 2 glasses. She would pour without being asked. She would leave. Lena and Adrian would drink the whiskey by the sink. Lena would say, "Adrian," and Adrian would say, "Yes," and Lena would say, "Let's get married." And Adrian would look at her, and Lena would say, "Again, for us this time, small, you, me, Irene, Reyes, Sophia, Andre, Priya, my sister if she'll come. My sister will come. I called her yesterday. She's coming. Adrian would set down the glass. You called your sister. I called her. I told her about you. I told her all the parts. She cried. She said she wanted to come. I said, come. I said, I will send you a ticket. I said, my husband is a complicated man, and he loves me very much, and I want you to meet him. Lena, your face is doing a thing. I know. Do you want to marry me again? Yes. Good. Good. Because I already told my sister we were doing it. She said yes. I need you to say yes too, because otherwise it's going to be an awkward flight. He would laugh. He would cry. He would laugh through the crying. She would sit on his lap, in his chair, in a kitchen where a contract was still smoking in the sink, and she would hold his face in her hands, and she would kiss him, and she would not let him look away. The second wedding would be small. It would be on the back lawn of the estate in May, in the last of the cold weather before summer, with 16 people there, most of whom had not been at the first one. The judge from Westchester would come, because Adrian had called him personally. Aunt Marta would cry, loudly, which was the only way Aunt Marta ever did anything. Irene would give a toast, which was almost unheard of, and would say, Mrs. Voss, when I told you, a year and a half ago, that people came out of Mr. Voss's study with their lives rewritten, I did not think I was going to be one of them. I have been rewritten by this marriage. I hope everyone in this garden has been rewritten by it. I think we have. Lena's sister would come up from Portland and would spend the week, and she and Lena would sit up one night in the kitchen until 3 in the morning with a second bottle of the amber whiskey, and they would fix, as much as two sisters can fix in one night of honest talking, 18 months of not speaking. Lena's sister would go home to Portland and would come back every 3 months after that, and Adrian would get to know her and would like her, and would quietly, 2 years in, pay off a student loan of hers without mentioning it to anyone. Her sister would find out. Her sister would show up one Christmas and hand Adrian a loaf of homemade bread and say, "Thank you." And Adrian would say, "Don't thank me, it's lazy." And Lena's sister would laugh until she was crying, because Lena had warned her about that sentence. All of this was ahead of them. But on that morning after Philadelphia, in the bed in the West Wing, with the coffee cups on the nightstand and the summer light coming in over the window frame Lena had redesigned 6 months earlier, Lena and Adrian did not yet know any of the specifics. They only knew the shape. The shape was this. He was going to get smaller as one thing and larger as another. She was going to choose him 7,000 times if she got 20 years. They were going to have a life. He kissed the top of her head. Lena. Yes. I want you to know something. Okay. The reason I offered the contract, the reason I called it a contract instead of what it really was, a bet, was because I could not at the time say out loud what I was hoping for. I was hoping for a witness. I was hoping for a person who would sit in this house and look at my life and say, this is a life. Not a ruin, not a holding pattern, not a siege. A life. I did not know you were going to be the person. I did not know there was going to be a person. I thought I was buying 18 months of plausible stability. I was buying the rest of mine. Adrian. Yes. Stop talking. I am going to kiss you until you stop talking. She kissed him until he stopped talking. Later. Much later. When they were old. When Adrian had been out of the chair the world was afraid of for more than 15 years and had been, in that time, simply a man in a wheelchair, married to a woman who loved him, when he had outlived Aunt Marta by 3 years and Irene by 7, and had, against every early statistical bet of his own body, made it to 68 in reasonably good health, when he was sitting on the back porch of the estate on a summer evening with a glass of lemonade and Lena beside him and the great-nephews of people he used to fear running in the grass below the porch with sparklers, Lena would lean over in her chair and say to him quietly, "Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me?" "Of course." I said, "Sit." "No, before that. You had Irene call me. She said, Mr. Voss would like to meet you. Tonight. 8 o'clock. I remember. If I hadn't come. You were going to come. But if I hadn't, Lena, he would say, you came. That's the only version of the story. There isn't another one." And she would think about that for a long time, watching the sparklers in the grass, watching the small, bright, sputtering lines that the children traced in the darkening air. There was another version of the story. She knew there was. There were 100 of them. There was the version where Marcus hadn't stolen, and she had kept the Tribeca firm, and she had never needed the meeting, and she had met and married some nice architect from Chicago at 40 and had 2 children and been, statistically, happy. There was the version where she had taken the call but not the contract. There was the version where she had signed but walked at 18 months. There was the version where she had walked at 10 months, the night of the gala, right after Niccolo Marchetti had lifted her hand, and she had lived out her 30s as a very successful divorcee with an excellent story she could not tell anyone at dinner parties. All of those were real versions of her life, in some universe. But this was the universe she was in. This one. The one with the man in the chair and the Chopin recording, and the bracelet that had been his grandmother's, and the sparklers in the grass, and the 16-year-old marriage between a woman who had been drowning and a man who had been told by a very frightened doctor at the age of 31 that he would probably not live to see 45. The truth Lena carried out of that life, and the truth she gave years later to her own niece at a kitchen table in Rochester when the girl was 24, and in a bad way over a bad boyfriend, was this: you do not get to choose what rescues you. You do not get to choose what door opens at the bottom of the well. You only get to choose, at the bottom of the well, whether to lift your face and look at the person holding the rope, and whether to make a clean decision about them. Not about the rope, not about the rescue, about them, before you take their hand. Because the rope, she told her niece, is always a contract. Every rope is. Love is a contract. Marriage is a contract. Friendship is a contract. The only ropes that aren't contracts are the ones that aren't holding anything, and those ones let you fall. Don't be afraid of the contract, she told her niece. Be afraid of a rope with no conditions. Be afraid of the hand that says it wants nothing. A hand that wants nothing has nothing to hold. Lena's hand had wanted something, walking into that study. It had wanted rent. It had wanted dignity. It had wanted her mother to have been right about her. Adrian's hand had wanted something. It had wanted a witness. Those 2 hands had shaken across a desk the size of a small car and had, without either of them planning it, built a life. The final lesson of that life, Lena would say to her niece, and then to her niece's daughter, and then, at 91, on a last clear afternoon, to her own nurse, was simple. She said it the same way each time. She said, "Don't wait for love to arrive without conditions. Love always has conditions. The question is only whether the conditions are worth the love." She looked at Adrian's grandfather's ring on her finger, which she had never taken off. Not once. Not on the day he was buried, not on any day after. "Mine were," she said. "Mine were worth it. Every condition, every inch, every 80-20, every one. And on the back porch, in the summer, 15 years before any of that, with the sparklers in the grass, Adrian had reached over in the dark and taken her hand and squeezed it once and not said anything, because he had never, in all the years she knew him, needed to say anything at the right moment. He had always only needed to be in the chair and to reach and to squeeze. And she, for her part, had always, always, always squeezed back.